Good evening. It is Monday, January 13th. This is the Norton Charter Commission. All members, with the exception of Dave Heaney, are present, who will be joining us in about 20 minutes. Can we stand and salute the flag, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, is there anybody other than Shane taping the meeting this evening? Is there anybody from the general public who would like to address the commission? Seeing none, moving on. Okay, I am very pleased to report we are down to our last set of interviews, and this will be with the Historic District Commission. Ladies, if you don't mind, why don't you have a seat up here with us?
Before I do that, I think it might be better. My name is Peg Dooley, and this is Nancy Federici. I am co-chair of the Historic District Commission with Sam Marina, and we have 3 other people that we have on board. This is the Historic District Commission.
Thank you.
And I think that might be beneficial.
Thank you very much.
I'm sorry, the Historic District.
Thank you.
Not the commission.
Thank you very much. Okay. All right, I'm just going to start by stating that the Historic District Commission has 7 members, and they are Board of Selectmen appointed. You have identified yourself as the co-chair?
Yes.
Okay, and with Sam,
Sam Marina,
he is a co-chair? Okay.
Kristen Foote, Ruth Gould,
And me.
And Nancy. Very good. And if you could just give me your tenures on the board?
I'm sorry?
How long have you been on the board?
I couldn't tell you.
Longer than 10 years?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
I don't know, who knows?
How about you, Nancy?
Probably close to like 7, but I also served on the Historic Commission,
Okay.
which is the other commission in the town for everything else outside of the District Commission.
Okay. That was a question on my list. So you cover the Historic District and the Historical Commission covers everything else?
No, the District Commission covers the center of town,
Yep.
and then the Historical Commission, do they go by Historical Commission?
Historic Commission, I think.
Historic Commission is everything outside of what we deal with,
Got it.
the rest of the town, basically.
Okay. All right, why don't you give us a brief explanation of the responsibility of the commission and what it does on a day-to-day basis?
Basically, we simply keep an eye on the structures that are within that area that you've got in front of you, and it has to do with the external. It has to do with structures on the property, signage. We are following the guidelines of the Massachusetts Historic Commission, which is probably 40 or so pages of guidelines. And as I say, it's the exterior. It certainly has nothing to do with the interior of these properties. It would be frowned upon if someone wished zebra stripes or purple dots on a house within the district.
Okay. Is a Historic District Commission state mandated? Does every town have one?
Your question is, does every town have one? I'm sorry, I can't hear very well.
That's okay. Sorry, I'll speak up.
I assume, I have no idea, I suppose we could find out. Certainly any town that has any historic significance, be it Salem or any place, I'm sure. We all have very old homes in Massachusetts, and I can only assume that many of the towns do.
Okay. How often does the commission meet?
When we meet, it's usually on the second Tuesday of the month, but in fact, we don't. We meet as needed. And as needed really needn't be that second Tuesday.
Okay. What would be identified as needed? What would constitute a need for a meeting?
If someone wanted to paint their house, change their windows, change their shutter, change anything on their property. Wheaton, for instance, as an example, they're obviously the largest landholders within the district. And for instance, come the spring, they frequently have what they have on their agenda for the summer, maintenance, general maintenance and otherwise, gutters being replaced, paint, et cetera, downspouts. Something most recent, the new dorm, on the other side of the new dorm in a garden area, there is a cement, what would you call it? It's not a landing. A cement,
Sort of a gathering place for them to put art and just things to look at for the students.
it's near a fire pit and a relaxed area, and their wish was to put a sculpture there, and they simply needed to review it with us.
Okay.
And we also spent quite a bit of time with them as they were developing the plans for the new dorm. And, suggested some exterior changes, which they adopted. We asked that they make it more sort of New England slash just not as modern, I think, as they wanted it, because it's seen from the road. We wanted to make sure that there was enough trees so that as they grow, they kind of, block it a little bit, but also not to remove. There's a very large rock that we feel is sort of, unique to Norton, and that's always been there on Wheaton. And again, these were suggestions, but actually they adopted most of them, so, which was nice.
So any properties that fall within this district, any external upgrades or changes they want to make has to go through your commission and get approval. Is that accurate?
Correct, and they know that.
Okay.
It's very odd that,
So this would be not just existing buildings, let's say if one of these areas were raised and they wanted to build something new, because it falls within the district, it has to go through your approval as well?
Nancy, I can't hear it.
Okay. That would follow, actually, it would, well, in other words, if someone wanted to raise a building, not just Wheaton. There's actually a list that notes all the historical houses in Norton.
Okay.
And we have the demolition delay bylaw. That is something that I think was approved quite a few years ago. And basically, if any historical building, or any building that's deemed historical, is it the housing? Who's the guy, the housing inspector? Whoever they would go to for a permit.
For a permit, demolition permit.
Demolition, they would look at this list, and then they'd have to notify us, and we'd have to hear the plan and whether or not to enact the demolition delay bylaw,
Okay.
which gives an additional, I believe, 6 months moratorium on the demolition to see if that building can either be moved or somehow restored. Actually, the building that was there at Wheaton where the new dorm is, that actually went under demolition delay bylaw because Wheaton tried to sell it. In other words, they put an ad in the paper, they said, I don't know, $1 or something, but you would have to move it. And they had several interested parties look at it, but it was in rough shape, and it was a building that basically had been added on several times and whatnot. So it ended up being demolished. Some of the historical interior was saved. It had the first bowling alley, I guess, in Wheaton that was there, and just some other interesting artifacts.
That having to do with the historic district, when there is a request to demolish elsewhere in town, the historic commission kicks in,
Okay.
of which we are not.
Okay. Is there a list of well, you said it was anything that falls outside of the district.
There's
Are there
actually, there's a
bylaws?
list that's being finalized,
Okay.
and it's, by street. And, basically, the ones that are in the district are, has an asterisk, and then the ones that don't. But we have like 250 houses in Norton,
Okay.
I believe, that are considered historic.
Yeah, I can think of one down on Smith. There's a very old one.
Yes.
Okay.
In fact, one of them was, though, way in the corner where it curves, that
Yeah.
was demolished,
Okay.
so.
So let's say they wanted to build another, just a new structure on the property, a shed of some kind. I'm assuming that would also need to go through and get approval
Correct.
from.
For instance, the house that's opposite the post office, well, I shouldn't say unfortunately, when Jack Nicholas, when a party bought the old Mansfield Bank building, as well as the property that was kitty corner to that on Taunton Avenue. One property empty was on Taunton Avenue, the other one was on 123 West Main Street. He built the house that's opposite, to make a long story short. And he had to go through several meetings of us, and that was before your time, was it?
Yeah.
That was probably about 10 years ago. So yes, new construction certainly has to come by us.
Got it.
Regarding this map, it is that which is seen 500 feet back from a public way is what is of interest to us.
Got it.
This says 200 feet in most of the areas, or is that not right?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
This shows 200 feet.
There's one that's 250.
Aha, Nancy, am I wrong?
I couldn't tell you.
So that was actually one of my questions. You just mentioned the.
I see that says 250 feet.
Yeah, you mentioned the new dorm came before you, but it's back here. It's not in that 200-foot zone, so I was wondering why they had to go before you where it's not in the zone.
No, it's,
That's not on there, that's why. This one hasn't been up.
No, it would be back here, though.
I think it's here, isn't it? Like closer to the Pine Street?
no, I think it was built where number
maybe it is, yeah,
21
right.
is.
Yeah, 21 is just.
21 was
Not shown.
the old.
I see it. Yeah. Okay,
this?
that makes sense.
These are the boundaries, right?
I was looking at the wrong,
Yeah, these aren't, that's not updated to the new dorm.
I thought this was the street.
Thinking about the commission, do you feel the commission has enough seats? Are they full?
No, we're down 2, as a matter of fact.
Okay.
Actually, was it 3?
Do you have-
Sorry.
The architect?
Starting with him,
Francis
sorry.
and Butch.
We're down 3, actually.
Okay.
One is slated for someone that has, and correct me if I'm not accurate, some historic architectural background, knowledge, which no one's really stepped up for in quite a while.
So is there a requirement for that type of expertise on the commission? Okay, but it's hard to find within the town.
I believe just an architect would even do.
Got it. Okay. What are your thoughts on how the commission is appointed? It's currently appointed by the Board of Selectmen. Are you happy with that?
Yes, there's frequently, I'm sure you've noticed in the Chronicle, et cetera, and probably on their website, there's a call out to fill various seats on various committees and what have you. And if someone steps forward and expresses interest, it would be to the selectmen and whether they wish to appoint them or not.
Can you tell me, does the commission have the support of any of the staff in town? I know you mentioned if something went through the building inspector's permitting process, but do you have the assistance of the staff of anybody within planning or ZBA or within the building
You mean like,
department?
well,
An actual town employee?
not specific, but we aren't shy, and we would probably see, what we don't know, we would seek out someone within the town or someone else who has a historic background. And many times, if someone is coming in front of us, they have their people with them. So they'll bring the architect, especially like for the Wheaton dorm. they'll bring, 4 or 5 or 6 of the different people that are involved between the Wheaton, people that would be involved with the construction, to an architect, to construction
Engineers, et cetera.
supervisor, yes.
Sure, go ahead.
So obviously, a lot of these buildings are owned by Wheaton. There are a couple ones that are homeowners, like for instance along West Main and then along Mansfield Ave. What happens if, say for instance, one of these, like say in lot 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6 on Mansfield Ave, say they wanted to build a shed, and they came in front of you guys and, were speaking about how they were gonna do it, and it didn't match what was required by the commission.
If it can, I'm sorry, go on.
So if you guys say no, it doesn't match is there a way for them to say, go in front of the town? Is there a way for them to say, appeal it? Or is it done right there if they're not meeting the requirements of the commission?
Correct.
That's it?
Yes, but by the same token, we're extremely flexible. Look at the church that's on the far corner of that's on the corner of West Main and 123 and 140. That is vinyl and aluminum. There were only something like 5 or 7 families that support that church, and they simply could not be painting it every 5 years, 3 years, 7 years. So as I say, we're really very flexible. If someone has come before us and they simply wanted to change their 6 over 6 windows to 12 over 12, we would look at it, see what houses looked like at the time, et cetera, et cetera. If that shed could be seen from the road, it is within our purview, so to speak.
And actually, most of the homeowners, they're historical buffs themselves. They usually, when they, and this is my understanding, because I own a historical house outside of the commission. And so I can do anything I want, but it is on the National Historic Register. But I can paint it pink, I can do, and, but to me, you buy a historic property, you enter into a historic area, I think with sort of an appreciation for being there, and to keep, what little history we have left in the town, relevant.
What happens, like, I know there's been obviously some talk about changing the center and fixing the traffic and whatnot. So let's say the state comes in whenever they decide to get around to it and decide that the center of town needs to be updated and fixed for traffic. Obviously, it's gonna impact almost every single one of these lots on Taunton Ave, Mansfield Ave, Library Square. Are they somebody that can come in and override the decisions of the historical commission and say, we're doing this because it's for, traffic and
We've
safety?
gone, the past 2 years, in particular the past year, we've gone through 2 studies having to do with, and why they were initiated, I'm sure, is because of that intersection. And the common remained intact, and Keith, of course, and his guys have done a tremendous job in refurbishing it and bringing it back to snuff, so to speak. I actually don't know what the state would have to say. But in fact, there were other alternatives to demolishing the town common and running through it. One of them being coming in at an angle from Taunton and simply straightening out that center with perhaps taking of a couple of properties. I'm going to say they'd be in trouble.
The other thing too is, I live right on Mansfield Ave. I can tell you when 3:30 hits. I can see the traffic line up. It's gone by 3:45-ish or whatever, but then it comes back again. I don't know what lets everybody out and whatnot, but I also know that when I've been in Lexington, the same thing happens. When I've been in Concord, the same thing happens. When I've been in Newton, when I've been in Wellesley. So this is sort of what this area is like. And so to me, if you really want to have wide streets and quick traffic and everything, my philosophy is then move somewhere else. So what can I say? I just don't ever see how we could speed it up, even though, I think perhaps maybe if there was a another lane on the other side in Mansfield to get on 495. Maybe somehow that would help people, because if, when you're coming up, you can't get off to come off on Mansfield Ave. You have to go up by the marketplace and come down and everything. I also know when the concerts get out. So, you know, and yet that other lane going down to 495 has really helped out. But we still get a lot of traffic at 11 o'clock. It's not a big deal for us, and they seem to move quickly. But, and I think one of the plans was to either move the church or demolish the church. I mean, that has, you know, Paul Revere's bell in it. So I don't know how many people even realize that.
I don't think that would ever happen. I don't think that would ever happen, because it's really not necessary, period.
You're not gonna see the church move or the common move.
I'm sorry, Keith.
You're not gonna see the church move or the common move.
Correct. Correct.
It might take the houses down on the side and try to make it wider that way, that's about it.
I am also in the center, and you simply live with it. You simply manage. To be quite frank with you, I think the lights are off of recent, because even in the middle of the day, there's a backup, and there's no need for that.
They're off.
There's something peculiar going on, having nothing to do with rush hour.
The lights are, so there is something wrong with the lights.
Yeah.
Every time you lose power, it messes up.
Oh, is that right?
Messes up those lights and.
It's the construction too, the construction, the sensors are out. From the construction, the sensors are out on the floor, in the ground.
They had all the construction with the sewer.
Yes. Yes.
So you have guidelines from the state, so when somebody comes to you and they want to make a change to the exterior of the property, you're consulting against state guidelines for historic districts? Okay. Do you have access to everything you need in order to do your job properly?
Sure.
Okay. What are your thoughts on the level of guidance, I guess isn't the correct word. I am assuming you are satisfied that if a property that was within the historic district came up for discussion within planning or a building permit, you would be consultant?
Yes,
Okay,
because they should know.
okay.
In us signing off on whatever the request was, copies go to the building inspector, the town clerk,
Okay.
and a couple of other boards.
Are there any associations of commissions of historic districts? Do you get together and meet with other towns? Do you consult with other towns on
No.
any?
No.
No.
We certainly have inquired regarding signage here, there, and everywhere, but it's nothing on a regular basis.
Okay. Okay, now thinking about, moving on, thinking about specifically town government, because that falls under our purview. Are there anything that you feel, and this can be in a personal capacity, that we should start doing, keep doing, or stop doing as it relates to town government?
That's quite encompassing.
It is.
Not myself.
Okay.
Nancy?
I can't think of anything. I probably would have had to think about that question a little bit, so off the top of my head, I really can't say.
Okay. If you come up with anything, we have email, just feel free to email, and we'll make sure we pass it along to the board if there are other things that we've missed. Was there anything we did not ask you that you'd like to talk about tonight?
Not that I can think of.
Okay. All right. Does anybody have any other questions?
No? I have a quick question.
Sure.
You had mentioned, Nancy, you were talking about Wheaton and the building of the new dorm and the suggestions you gave them. And it sounded like it was a good experience, that you get along with them. Has that been the relationship with your commission and Wheaton College over the years, that you have a good relationship and a good working? Because they don't.
It's been my experience, and I know that Peg's been on there longer, but there's wonderful communication between them. They're very respectful, they're very timely. I think they know the commission well. So, I mean, when they replaced the president's fence with vinyl, I mean, that V is like a bad word to us. And we really wished that they could have kept the original fence, but they basically said, look, at these are our issues and our reasons.
They've been very good. They really are very good partners
In
through
fact,
the years.
they were very helpful when we were restoring
True.
the common. Their librarians were able to give us a lot of historical documentation for lighting. We were originally thinking about going with a different type of lighting with more of a frosted globe, which is very appealing. But it turns out that that actually was later than the time period that we were working with to save the fence. So it was the late 1800s. So, and that corresponded with what Wheaton had. So, we were able to be as historically accurate, I think, as we could possibly be, without maybe bringing in specialists and we don't have funding and whatnot. So, yeah, I think it's a really nice relationship, and we learn from them, and they kind of understand where we're coming from, and,
Oh, good, that's nice.
yeah,
Good to know.
they're great.
Thank you.
For that matter, they have paid for various things that have gone on in the common, trimming of trees, cutting down of trees, adding to the landscaping, et cetera.
Good to know. Thank you.
Any other questions? That's it. We very much appreciate your time. Thank you very much for coming in and meeting with us.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Hey. Hi, Peter. Okay.
Thank you.
Is there any discussion about the last interview? Nope. Okay. All right, let's review the minutes of our last meeting of December 30th, 2019. If there are no issues and everybody's had a chance to review, I'll take a motion to accept the minutes of Monday, December 13th, 2019.
I motion
I
to
said 13th.
accept the minutes from January, December 30th,
Yep.
2019.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor?
I'm going to abstain.
Unanimous. What's that?
Abstain, since I was not here.
Okay. From what I understand, I guess there's been some discussion, even if you have not attended the meeting or watched the meeting, it doesn't sound like you have to abstain, just
Oh, okay.
for future reference.
I thought I did.
All right.
I did watch the meeting.
Good job.
I did.
It was riveting. Okay, moving on. All right, administrative items, I think we're okay on. I'll ask about that later. Did anybody have any, upon review of the list of decisions to make, did anybody note anything in particular that was missing besides Sandy? No? Okay. One of the things that we neglected in the original list was the frequency of elections. And I will willingly admit it wasn't something I was paying particular attention to while we're reading the charters, but apparently there is a difference in several towns. We can look through the data that Sandy had put together. It seems like town council, when there are 2-year terms for the council, seems to adopt in biennial election cycle as opposed to an annual election cycle. So that's something to keep in mind when we get into the decision-making, because there are ramifications going in each direction, up and down, to that decision. So everything seems to be sort of intertwined. So keep that in mind. All right, there were nobody else noticed anything we were missing. I think as we go along and kind of go through charters, we'll come up with a more comprehensive list for some of the other sections within the charter. But I think I'm comfortable in that we've at least identified all of the ones that we need to make for the near future. Let's see. Okay, so is everybody ready to have a vote with regards to the recommendation of the commission for the legislative branch of government?
Yep.
Okay. All right, if there's no further discussion, I will take a motion to have the commission consider town council as the legislative branch of our form of government, subject to many, many other questions that need to be answered and review. But we will move forward on the basis of a town council form of government unless we make a decision elsewhere. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Is there any further discussion on that matter? Okay, do we need to do a roll call vote? No? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It is unanimous. We stayed unanimous. Yay. Okay, I just wanted to make a couple of comments before we start getting into some of the discussions. As we consider some of these questions, I think it's very unlikely we're all going to agree on everything. It's just not possible. If things get a little heated, we'll take a break and potentially table it until the following meeting. I encourage everybody to fight for the pieces that are important to you based on what you have personally heard. State your case, defend your position, and don't back down if it's something that you feel strongly about. That being said, if you're going to dig in, you're going to have to ask yourself the question, is this a deal breaker for you? Meaning, would this change your recommendation to move forward with the charter that is being proposed by the commission at large? And by deal breaker, you also have to consider that if we do have a hill that somebody is willing to die on, that goes against the majority, then that person would, or persons would be responsible for forming the dissenting opinion to the charter, the commission's charter recommendation. So things just to keep in mind. Be open to others' ideas, be flexible, be thoughtful. Yeah, be thoughtful about which hills you want to die on. As I've made a list, when I went into this, I made a list of things that, I definitely had to see, and at this point, I'm willing to throw out almost all of them.
I was gonna say, a lot of hills.
I don't have many hills I want to die on. I like the idea of term limits, but if it comes down to this commission is not in favor of them, I am not going to push. I'll state my case. I'm certainly not going to, go quietly, but I am not going to put up that much of a stink. It's not a hill I'm going to die on. But again, I'm willing to state my opinion and why I feel that way in the hopes of swaying others to my thinking. And I am also open to being swayed. So I just ask that everybody operate in the same manner. Again, remember, we are never going to satisfy everybody. We need to present a package that we think we can sell to the town. that addresses the largest number of issues and the greatest number of people. And I think if we go forward on that basis, then we'll have done our jobs. Any questions, comments? Anybody want to add anything?
One
Yes.
quick question of clarification. You mentioned that if there's a hill you want to die on, that you form a dissenting opinion when you present that to the town. So are you potentially going to have dissenting opinions for each issue?
Nope, it is so the charter will make a recommendation.
Yeah,
If it is a decision within the charter's recommendation that makes you not want to vote for that recommendation, then there is a dissenting opinion.
I guess I'm thinking we could all have different hills.
Yes,
So
yep, but if it causes you, if we get to the point where you would not move forward with the recommendation,
of the town council,
Yes.
the whole thing. I
Yes.
gotcha. All right, I got you.
yep, that's when there would need to be a dissenting opinion.
I hear you, okay.
And it would be, it would, let's say, for example, it was you and it was supported by Keith, one of you would write it and it would state the two members of the commission that that were dissenting or not in agreement with the recommendation of the majority.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying.
Sure.
If we come to an agreement, will town council review it?
Yes, so what happens is, so as of right now, once we start kind of getting into some of the decisions regarding the legislative branch, I'm going to go back to town council, Lauren Goldberg, and her office, and tell her we've reached a decision with respect to that and how we're planning on moving forward. And I'm gonna have a conversation with her as to how she wants to start that process. There's some thought as to, she's written, I forget, I went back through the first meeting with her, and she said she's worked on like 130 different towns. I am assuming she has a template with which she is comfortable. And my first question would be to her, do you recommend amending our current charter or starting over with a template with which, you feel is a better basis for where we want to go? So we'll start from there, and then as further decisions are made, we will feed them to her. I am expecting, once sections are completed, based on the decisions that we've made, she'll send them back to us for review. We'll review them, probably section by section, to make sure that they are in line with what we voted on and what we've decided. And by the end of that process, we should have a whole charter. The transition section is going to be a little bit different. There's going to be probably, there's some guidance from other towns, but we're going to have to kind of make those decisions based upon how our town is specifically structured and how we want the changes to be implemented. So that was the only one that I see we're probably going to have to build a little bit more from scratch than any of the others.
And just for clarification, did I hear you say that we can send her piecemeal? Like, we don't have to send her everything? We can send her, the legislative branch?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I went back and I watched the first meeting with her again and went through my notes, and yes, her recommendation definitely was, as you make decisions, feed them to her. I don't know if it'll be her specifically that'll be drafting them, but somebody within her office would. And I think it is in our best interest to get her those as quickly as possible, knowing that we are not the only town that she works with, and the only business that she has. So given that we are on a specific deadline and have to get our draft to the Attorney General for review, it's in our best interest to keep her up to date as we go along. So that's my goal, is as we go through and make decisions with respect to those articles, we would feed them to her. And, she said they can be very bare bones. This is what we've decided, and she can craft the language around it.
That's good.
Any questions, comments? Anybody else want to add anything? All right. Okay. that being said, so we have a list of things that need to be addressed and decided upon. And it seems like a nice checklist, but there are, once we got into it and started looking at it, there are a lot of things I think we're going to find that are interdependent upon other areas' decisions being made. One of them, for example, being the frequency with which we want to hold elections. That's going to have an effect on certain things with respect to the term of the town council and whether we want those terms staggered or we want to replace them en masse. So keep that in mind, that not everything is cut and dry, and if there are things that you are thinking of that are interdependent upon something else that we may not have considered, please obviously raise your hand. I think everybody will, but I think it's probably do we want to start with the number of members or the term of members?
I would say the number
Say the
of
number.
members.
Okay.
Number?
Does anybody have, oh, sorry, one thing. Sandy had handed out within the packet, she did some excellent analysis and took the towns with the population less than 50,000 and drafted up the count or the number of folks on their legislative body, and further went in to identify how they were chosen, whether by district or precinct or ward, or they were elected at large, and how often their elections are held, and the term for those counselors. So there are some outliers on either end, 7 being the low end, 15 being on the high end. I guess I'm going to open it up. Does anybody have a very strong opinion about? All right, let's have fun.
All right. So I'm gonna, my opening suggestion is 9. One from each precinct, so that's 5, and then 4 at large. I think it's very important that we have district counselors to make sure that the entire town is represented. Because if we just do at large, I fear that if you don't have the voter turnout in one section, you could have all of your counselors coming from one section of town. And I think it's important to actually have representation, but I also think as we're selling this to the town, we need to make sure that the people feel like they are going to be properly represented. So.
Do you have any guidance on what to do if we do not have a candidate from a specific district?
No, I haven't.
Okay. Does anybody have a different thought?
Slightly different,
Okay,
not much. My recommendation would be 7.
okay,
Similar construct, 5, 1 from each district. The only difference is I was thinking only 2 at large, and my thought process is if there's a hot issue happening in one particular area or one area of town, that if you have 4, you could potentially swing the majority vote just by having the 4 at large and the 1 from your district be kind of on the same page or aligned. I think 2 would prevent that possible swing from happening.
Is your decision weighted in any way on thoughts about being able to get 9 folks to run?
It is. That's also possibly weighs into it because we have so much of a challenge getting volunteers now for the town that I think that 7 is a good number.
Okay. Anybody else have a strong opinion?
Are we talking just numbers, are we talking, we were assuming getting into the precinct conversation? It seems like one's dependent on
We are kind of wading into both territories. So let's start with just numbers. We're at 7 and 9. Does anybody have a strong opinion on a different number than either of those?
I was thinking, I don't have a strong opinion on either one. Like, I was thinking, when I was taking my notes, somewhere between 7 or 9, and it was the same construct that these ladies were talking about, each from the district. And that was the assumption that districts we are keeping them aligned as they are, right? That's
Yeah.
not within our purview to change.
I think we
keep them.
have to.
I-
I don't think it falls within, the districts fall within the charter.
I think
No,
this,
maybe
does the
not.
state do like a redistricting every so many
I-
years or something?
I think it
I think it
depends
would
on
be
the.
the town,
Or the
to do
town.
the town precincts, but,
I think it's gotta meet state requirements, though.
yeah,
Yeah.
like it has to be evenly split. and-
Yeah,
That'll
but I'm
handle
not
itself
sure
as it works
district is
out.
something we're allowed to touch within the charter. I don't believe it is.
Yeah, I don't think we can affect that. I think it just.
Okay, so the districts, that was my question, those are just the same. on that
The
district.
precincts would remain the same.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I had 7 to 9.
We use those words interchangeably, and I don't think they're interchangeable. Yeah, I think they're two
Yeah.
different things. So districts can be multiple precincts.
Yes,
We are strictly 5 precincts.
yeah.
We don't have districts.
We don't have enough
now.
precincts to make up really more than one district.
Okay, so I meant precincts when I was.
I'm using them interchangeably
Yes.
as, we would call the we would make the precinct a district for the
Right.
purposes
I did
of
the
town
same
council,
thing.
yeah.
Well, I think if they call them precincts, you would run as a precinct 1. You wouldn't run as a district 1.
Well, we could call it whatever we wanted, so.
Yeah, it would probably, if we did, it would say the districts fall in line with the voting precincts.
Right.
But with regards to precincts, I believe I don't believe we have any ability to amend any of those within the charter. No.
And when you're talking about the districts, so we have the precincts, but we're talking about, 5, 1 from each precinct. We're not even discussing the districts, correct?
We don't have districts.
Okay, all right.
District 5.
But that's on the state,
Right.
yeah,
Okay,
But we
so
have-
just not using that
Yeah.
We have 5 precincts or
terminology.
6.
5 precincts.
Five precincts.
All right, so that's just,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And
That's why it
before
might
that,
be-
Back in the days, we had 3 districts and then 1 to 4.
But if we have 5 precincts. But if one is larger than the others, there should be probably 2 councilmen in that.
The precincts should be divvied up so that they're even.
There should be.
Right, I mean, I think that's what the state requires. is
Yeah.
that the population is generally even in each precinct, and then every 10 years you change, you
Yeah.
look
That's
at
going
it.
over here, 274 East Main Street.
Yeah.
Well, they might shift some streets.
So they-
Yeah.
they-
yeah, but the state, I think, would be in
I think we
charge
do
of
that.
realigning our precincts. We don't have any control over that.
And I think we do it after the census, so
Yes.
like that would be coming up
And
again.
I know we're talking semantics, but we might be better off just keeping it named precincts.
Yeah,
And
That's
you're not
fine.
getting into districts with
Yeah.
people worrying about District 4 and District,
Yeah.
we're in a split district anyway, state level. I mean, there's no,
Right.
there's no reason to confuse people even more of
Yeah.
what district, just keep it what we have. Everyone knows when they go to vote, they're voting for the precinct.
Yeah.
That's what they got their map in. I know it's semantics, but it may just be for confusion wise.
Sorry, I think I asked the question, was anybody thinking of anything much different between 7 and 9?
I was 9.
You were 9? I could go either way. It's one of those.
Yeah, I don't.
I'm the same.
I see the point of, I like the idea of 9, but I think 7 might be safer, just so we have enough representation, that enough people want to run. We may be surprised and we could implement this and 13 people want to run. I'll be very, very happy, but probably not going to happen.
I think it also depends if you go to 9, what's the avenue of filling, say, 1 or 2 seats if you don't have them run? 'Cause I think that also may sway people's opinion on how. So is it something that the council, let's just say the 6 members that are elected and there's 3 spots open, how are those 3 spots filled? Because I really don't 9 or 7 to me doesn't matter, but I would like to know that if it's 9, and even if it's 7, if we don't get the numbers, how are those 2 spots being filled?
So I think it's a very valid question, but unless it's gonna affect your decision on 7 versus 9, I think it's one we table. And
I agree.
We absolutely have to talk about,
Yep.
but that's another conversation.
Okay. Would anybody feel strongly if it was 7 versus 9 or vice versa?
So I don't.
I'm more in favor of 7 personally.
Okay.
I think 9 is, giving the participation levels in this town, I think that's somewhat of a stretch. And I think we need to be realistic. And so I lean towards 7. If there were shorter terms, then perhaps a larger body makes sense. You know, I mean, if they're all 2-year terms, for example, then I think you might get more participation. You know, people try for 2 years. But I'm more inclined to go with 7. I think it's more realistic.
A quorum might be the issue too, with, if this is obviously gonna be an important, town council's gonna be important, they may be meeting weekly, throughout the year, maybe on the slower times, maybe every other, but to get a quorum at 9 might be a little bit more difficult, where you're able to get 7, you might be like I said, I'm open to either one, it doesn't.
I would have argued that the other way, because I think you're looking at it as, you have to get 5 people to the room. I was thinking you can only lose 4 people from the 7, right? So I think that's a little 6 of one, half dozen of the other.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, I like the idea of 9, not necessarily because I don't have a strong opinion about the number necessarily, but I really like the idea of staggered terms, right? 'Cause the idea of turning over the entire board every X number of years, whatever it is, frankly makes me really nervous, right? So it's hard to break up 7. It's easy to break up 9. You do elections every 3 years for 3 people, and the math just works. And then you don't have to worry about trying to find 7 people that are gonna run at one given time.
Well, the 7 existing, as long as we don't implement term limits, the 7 existing town councilors could still run again.
They could, right, but.
You're not looking for
but
7
you're-
new people.
Yeah, but you're looking for 7 at the time. You're potentially getting 7, an entirely new board, or at least maybe the concern about the majority of a board coming in at the same, if you're limiting it to 3 in an election, you're not gonna take a majority of the board with any one election. And yeah, you could do like 2, 2, and 3 with the 7, but it's neater and it's symmetrical.
I think it's a great point with the,
That's very type A.
What are you saying?
I like it.
I think it's a great point. I think it's a great point with the turnover, like,
Yeah.
being able to take an entire board and say, okay, you're all, potentially all out, and
Yeah.
then filter, what's the delay in time
Yeah.
of trying to get 7 new
Everybody's gotta
people?
learn
Right.
everything.
Yeah, and I
You
mean, you're
need to
talking.
have that continuity.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you gotta have at least, like you said, if there's 3 going out, okay, and 3 are beating an election, you at least have 6 there that are able to say, hey, listen, this is what we've been working on, and catch them up to speed, and at least not miss weeks on end of things. So that's a great point, I agree with you.
I just want to be clear, but if you have 7, you don't have to necessarily elect all 7 at the same time.
No.
You can
Yeah,
still stagger them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You could
But the
have,
9 is so neat, 3,
Yeah.
2, and 3.
I can't tell if you're agreeing with me or mocking me right now, but either way, I'm good.
So unless you do a 2-year term, and then it's not so nice.
Yeah.
Then it's not really nice.
Right, that's why my whole point was prefaced on a 3-year term of 3 people each time.
we should totally throw you off and be like 4 years.
Well, it is a possibility. That's, the gamut seems to run anywhere from 2 to 4, and those with 4 do have, at least the 4 that I saw, yeah, everybody who's got a 4-year term has staggered.
And what's the asterisk on here, Sam?
So does the S mean staggered and F?
Yeah, it means staggered, F is fixed. The star was that they do, every, well, I mean, it's self-explanatory with the biennial, because they have 4-year terms, so that every 2 years,
Gotcha,
they turn.
got it.
So, I feel like we're having so many different conversations.
We are, but I think it's good, I prefer the conversation to kind of occur organically and to start thinking about, again, the interdependencies of some of the things that we're thinking about.
So because we're talking and we're depending, because some seem to be making their choice of how many based on precincts, I will throw out that I am against the precinct. Primarily because I'd like to see the best 7 or 9 people in front of me. Right? That I feel like there's, and actually there's a kind of a fear that in the first election, we could have nobody running for a precinct. We could have, and I've looked at a lot of other towns and what they have, and typically you might have some contested races in the at-large races, but the precincts, it's like one person you're voting for, and they're winning by, you know, a few hundred votes. So are we really getting, I guess, the best 7, 9 people if we don't have the choices for empty races or uncontested races? And then now, if you have contested races at large and there's 3 or 4 people running, I'd love all 4 of them maybe, and not the person in my precinct, I wouldn't have that choice.
So, obviously, months ago, I was totally, when we started talking about town council a little bit, I was totally with you that I like the at-large. As I've kind of spoken to more people and these interviews have come in, and some of the things we've seen in town with being able to have somebody they can go to and bounce questions off of, that's what kind of changed my mind on the precinct thing. Where I understand your points, because I do believe that is going to happen. I believe that someone's going to run for a precinct, and that's what you're going to get. And it's probably not going to be many contested races. I do like the idea that you know your precinct you're in, you know who your contact is, you know you can go speak to him or her, and they should be looking out for your best interest in that precinct.
So I look at our precincts, and we have roads that are in neighborhoods that are in 2 precincts. We have, areas that, just like Bay Road, right, it's 2 different precincts. You have, I don't know that if I was gonna go to somebody who to represent me, it would necessarily be because they're in my precinct. If I was gonna choose somebody to talk to or to, try to get them to, dissuade them in some way. I don't know that the people in my precinct are necessarily the first consideration with who I would feel comfortable going to. I don't even know necessarily when I'm voting what precinct people are in right now, so I don't know how that would be something I would really look at.
It's a great point.
I just think we've had some very disparate issues depending on where in town you live, and I think people would I think people would feel comfortable having somebody from their
Keep in mind,
precinct.
they accuse themselves though if it came down to a vote that they were actually too close to.
If they were too close to it, sure, but,
Yeah.
but you, to be too close to it, you would have to have like a direct, like, financial interest, or, it would have to be something pretty close for you to have to recuse yourself.
Right, I mean, in your neighborhood,
Yeah.
right, in your vicinity. I think, we don't choose our planning board by precinct, and they make a lot of decisions based on our neighborhoods. To me, if you were gonna go any precinct based, that would be where you make the argument, but I feel like if they are really close to the point where they're impacted, they're not gonna be able to vote. And if they're not, then maybe they are engaged, maybe they're not engaged in what's going to be. I mean, people that are upset about things happening in their neighborhood are just the people in that neighborhood, not necessarily in that entire precinct. And that could be 2 different precincts that they're coming across.
True. The other thing I'm thinking of is we're suggesting a very radical change from, and there are some people who do like having a direct representation to be able to go to town meeting. We've decided that that's not working for the town, but if we're making this sale, I feel strongly that they need to have that connection. They need to feel like somebody's.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to increase
Close to them.
engagement across the board anyway, because people are engaged either because they weirdly just love town politics, or because something has upset them at one point or another, and then they became engaged, right? And so the concern that I have is if you don't have representation from the wards, is that you could get everybody in one area that's ticked off about an issue, now they're all engaged, now they're all running, and that's the pool of your candidates.
The other thing too, that it kind of brings I hate to throw this out there, but with the 9, there is a potential for the one precinct and then the 4 being voted in from a precinct that has something going on. Like, if there's a major project going on, or if there's something coming, and let's say there's given notice that something's gonna be built, or something's gonna be done, or the zonings or whatnot, and those 4 people decide, we're running, they're the only ones to run for those 4 at-large seats. You may have a 5 on 4 of that one precinct, because you put the precincts in.
But geographical location is an arbitrary breakdown like that. You might as well say you'd have, you know, why wouldn't we assign a council person for schools representation, or for public service, or for anything else, or just because it's geographic, like,
But-
I feel like we're only talking about precincts because there's a way that it's boxed out. So if it's not clear, I agree with Sandy. I should lay that out on the table. But it's a trade-off, right? It is absolutely a trade-off, and there's valid points on both sides. When I look at the idea, though, of having somebody to go to, you know, I think a lot of what we've been talking about for the past several months is about the town has grown beyond, right? Whether it's beyond town meeting or beyond other things. I think it's fair to say that the town has grown beyond walking down the street and knocking on the door of your representative, right? It's gonna be an email or a phone call or showing up at a meeting or whatever it might be. And even if it's that person's gonna maybe listen more than somebody else would, well, at the end of the day, that person's 1 vote out of 7 or 9, right? So, you know, when I just think of the things that either I or Gina have gone to talk to a town person about, the location that person lived in town was never a consideration. Gina was at the school committee meeting the other night with some concerns about, right, and she wasn't talking to anybody that lived near us, she was talking to the people that could affect change. So the trade-off of having access to somebody who's local to you in today's day and age versus ensuring that we have the representation and that the races are competitive and all that, I just come down on the side of we need to make it easier for people to participate, not harder, right? And not to stretch the conversation too much, but my opinion on term limits is going to be shaped by much the same thing of I want to be able to get as many people into the process as possible and not put restrictions on where they're coming from or how long they can serve or whatever it might be.
The only thing I disagree with that is I think I don't think it's a fair point of how important geographical location may be with town council. I think with you talking about something with the school committee that affects the entire town, it's one thing, but to me, this is with the town council being formed, with projects coming up, with issues being wherever they're gonna be built. I mean, we've already had them in the past.
Yeah.
I think that.
But those are all just examples of special interests. whether it's geographic
Well, I
based
understand that,
or
but I think that,
needs-based.
I understand, but I think that the problem with town council is going to be is that, you know, when you're talking about the school, you're talking about the entire school district, you're talking about the entire town. Where if something's being built at, say, the east side of town or the west side of town, you know, you may have people that are being directly affected within that precinct. They may want to go to that individual person that represents them and say, how are you voicing the opinion?
But you should be able to go to all 7 or 9 people and ask that same question.
I understand that, but I think some people are gonna want that ability to say, how are you representing us when this project comes up, because it directly affects precinct 2.
All right, I'm gonna just throw in here to be the devil's advocate. If we have all at large, I am expecting that a town councilor, even if we had them by precinct, I am expecting every town councilor to make a decision for what is the best for the town as a whole, not the best for their precinct. So the precincts shouldn't matter.
I think
That's-
that's ideal. I think that is very ideal, I really do. And you even want the same for even within the precinct, too. And you want to hope that that happens, and you want to hope
Yeah.
that the people you vote for. and,
Absolutely.
You know, I do support the precincts for a number of reasons, but I would also hope that I could go speak to someone at large, should I need to, on top of that as well. I think the precincts are, as Kevin and as they were saying over here, I think it's important for the people. I think that the people want to have someone to go to, and they want someone to say, this is who's representing me. I know that the at-large would do that as well, but I think it would provide some comfort in terms of this radical change that we are proposing. And I think one of the cons in the town council is that citizen participation and decision-making process is limited, more limited than it is in the open town meeting. And I think that we need to provide them with as much motivation and representation as possible. And I think the district's precincts is one of the ways to do it.
Do you think the average Norton citizen
Mhm.
knows what streets are in their precinct?
No, I
So-
do not.
So.
But I think it'll be important if, it's not important right now, because we don't, the precinct is where you're gonna go vote. So for instance, you're walking in to vote, that's where you go to fill the ballot. There's no real ramifications of you meeting with the selectmen, there's no real ramifications of you meeting with the planning board. I think if you move this to a precinct-type town council, I think it becomes very important. I think it becomes very important to the people that are in that. I think that person going to represent you in town council meeting,
But they're-
let's just say, for instance, they go into the town council meeting. They may be or may not be making decisions that you and your neighbors that are in that precinct don't like. Well, okay, then you are the one who have to answer to them at the ballot box. That's one of the ways that you bring some of the citizen participation into town council, is to say, look, if you're not representing the people of precinct 1, if you're not meeting with us, if you're not helping us out, if, we call you about little things as potholes and whatever it may be, we expect you to help us out with these type of things, or at least get some things done. If you're not doing that and you're not being a participant of our precinct, we can show you at the ballot box. Where I think at the at-large, they're gonna say, well, we may not like you, but 2, 3, 4, 5 love you, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so I'll also add to that, one of the very real concerns that we identified a few weeks back was that we make sure people feel they have a voice in the process, because if we get rid of town meeting, right, they need to have a voice. If I'm gonna have a voice, and I want someone from my area that knows the very real concerns that are specific to my particular area, that will be the voice for my area. And so I think that's a way of ensuring that they feel like they have a little bit of a voice too. Now, you may not get the best candidates, but if the only candidate that's running for town council that's in my precinct is a crappy candidate, then you know what? Rally the troops and get someone better for the next time. That's what should ignite something on the people in that precinct to kind of get moving and get active and get someone better for the next one.
So a couple things. One of the big issues we keep hearing is special interest groups, right? And that these neighborhoods coming out and only voting for what's best for their neighborhood. I feel like this is doing the exact opposite. I feel like this is now saying that your neighborhood is important and that you should be voting for what's in your neighborhood and what's going to benefit your neighborhood, as opposed to what's going to benefit the whole town. The other pieces, again, go back to what Laura asked before, what if nobody runs? Our first very first election we have, we have to keep in mind, things can change, right? We can always adjust the charter later. But if our very first election, if we don't get people in certain precincts, and there are precincts that barely come out to vote, the numbers are not even at all in this town. So if you have nobody running for that position, and it's the very first election, I just feel like as a charter commission, that's a huge, huge red mark on our validity, our work, our everything, that would be then, like basically, right, that we would be able to fill those spots. So that's a big concern, that what happens if.
Could be. Question for Sharon.
For whom?
Sharon, town council.
Yeah.
Laura.
Lauren.
Lauren. Hey, why did I say Sharon?
Me personally, this isn't for me personally, this is not something that I am I'm very open to either one, whether it be precincts or whether it be, I like having the discussion and, so people can get some ideas. I'm thinking about it. I think town council is the most important thing. I think that's the number one. I think the little things that if we choose to go the representative of the precincts, or we decide to go with 9 at large and still stagger them, I still think that if we decide later that, it needs to be, slightly adjusted and whatnot, those things can be done after. Town council is the most important thing. I think it's gonna get the most done for the town. I think it's gonna move us forward. We obviously know that because we voted for it, you know what I mean? So I'm personally, I don't wanna say I don't care, but it's not something that I'm gonna stand up here on a soapbox and go crazy about.
Okay, based on a conversation that happened a few months ago, I've been giving this a little bit of thought. I have a possible compromise idea. I don't know whether it's legal. That is something I would need to run by Lauren Goldberg. But it might be a reasonable compromise. We would have 9 seats, all at large, with no more than 2 being elected. That's the key term, being elected from any one precinct. If we end up with a precinct without a candidate, there would have to be a mechanism, and I'm viewing it probably something along the lines of a joint committee would be formed to find and appoint someone from that precinct that does not have representation, using some set of defined parameters for the search. They have a set period of time to find that candidate. If that candidate cannot be found or established within that period of time, it defaults to the person who received the next highest number of, or the highest number of votes, who was not seated during the election.
You did put a lot of thought into that.
Seriously.
I did.
I'm impressed.
Can I just
I
make,
did my homework.
can I just make one, like,
Sure,
I don't mind this, can we just maybe find out where we actually stand
sure.
as the 9 of us on the number, whether it's precinct or at large, and then we can go from there and see, where we stand as a vote, and then
Yeah.
kind
The
of
number is
discuss.
even less critical to this. Well, let me ask, is the number critical?
I just think we should find out where we all stand, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and one last comment on the number is, I think the most important thing is that we have choices to make, right? We don't just have one candidate to pick from, that we have choices to make. And we already have issues with having choices to make with the 5 Board of Selectmen. So I'm concerned with going to 9, that we're gonna have even less choices to make. So that's just my last point to make on the 7 versus 9.
Want to start, Sandy?
Oh, at 7 or 9, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
All at large.
7 and 2.
So 9 seated.
I'm like, what?
7
and 2?
Is this a score?
What are the 7 consisted of?
It would be 9, 2 at large, and then 7 precincts.
But we have 5 precincts.
Okay.
5 and 4.
So 7.
David?
I'm thinking more lines 5 and 2. As far as precincts, I'm not really sure, to be honest with you. I think deep down, I'm probably against the precinct concept. I think the town, is certainly not defined by precincts today by any way, shape, or form. I do agree with the selling point aspect of it. I think long-term, I think that's probably the wrong way to go. But I can see where it's popular up front. So, I guess, long story short, I guess I would favor no precincts.
So it's not 5 and 2, just saying 7.
Yeah.
So are we just giving the number, or are we giving the structure?
If you've got a strong preference on a number,
7,
then you think precincts.
the 5 and 2, yeah?
Yep.
I can go 7 or 9, but I do still think precincts would be my preferred, although I'm intrigued by your suggestion.
Yeah, I am too. And this is not my hill
That's
either.
some more thought. Because I think we've seen some other charters that sort of have similar, not exactly that, but similar,
I
like,
stole it,
yeah.
subconsciously, I've stolen that, I've stolen it from somewhere.
Yeah.
I don't remember where, and I don't remember if it was specifically town council, but
Yeah.
I do remember something to that effect.
I watched Inception last night, so.
West Wing.
We know how, Janie, how do you feel?
So I'm 7 or 9 too, the split, so I would do, like 5 or 7, or 5 and 9. With the precincts, I really don't look at them as, this special interest groups or sectionalism developing. I just think it's a way for people to have a go-to, to have that person. I think it makes people feel good that they have that too. And I also think that just because, if I live in precinct 1, and I'm concerned about something in precinct 2, I should be able to go there and talk to that person as well. So I don't really see it as big sectionalism and division among the districts. I just see it as a way to provide some representation. And when you were reading your alternative choice, right, the compromise, I felt like a lot of it was very similar. It was just a matter of semantics in terms of, so you're electing 9 people, no more than 2 per district, right? So you're still spreading out the districts one way or the other.
Yes.
So I feel like that is a matter of semantics. And the other thing that concerns me a little bit about at-large is, we're worried about getting people to run and getting people in districts to run. But the one thing that concerns me about large, if we do, I'm actually a little more hopeful that with this radical change and with this division, I'm hoping we're going to see a little more people running and being active. I'm hopeful, maybe a little too so, I don't know. But I'm hopeful to see more participation. But I worry that if we do all at large, we're going to find some criticism along the line of saying, well, all our councilmen are, or council people are, this, group of people or this group of people, and that's going to be the criticism, I think, of other people, that you're not going to get a wide variety of people running or even maybe have that choice. I feel like there'll be a criticism of, these are all school people that are running because those are the people that chose to run, right? You might have enough people to run. And I use that term school because, let's face it, we live in a town where there is that division, right? Or you have so many old townies running, right? And then you have a group, my fear is that you're gonna have a group of people that others are gonna criticize and say, look, now you have that special interest group sitting on the council. And that would be my fear of in all at large. You look confused.
I do, but I'm actually wondering if you can control that even if you had precincts. Even if you had precincts, you could still have a, faction? Is that a-
Sure, that's a better word.
It doesn't sound nice, but there's gotta be something nicer, but
Just to follow up on what Janie said, I too am not looking at the precincts as being special interest groups, but one of the things we heard a lot was communication problems. And if you have a district, a precinct counselor, you've got that initial person, and I think it's more comfortable for people, especially with a new system.
On the flip side, though, if you don't like your counselor, you feel
then
much
there-
more comfortable talking to another
Sure,
counselor.
yes, you can. I'm not saying you have to go to that.
Sure,
I'm
no, I
just
get
saying,
that,
I don't know.
but you're talking to somebody who doesn't represent you, so you're kind of talking to.
At large represents
Oh, you
you.
know that far.
Sure.
yeah.
And I also think that, I think that people who are going to run and represent people within a precinct, they're also they're representing everybody in the
Right.
town. They're not just representing that precinct. And I don't see that as that being their marching orders or that kind of being their main goal as well. Someone in precinct 1 may go to their counselor and have, issues or something they want to talk about from precinct 2 that they know will impact the whole town. So I just don't see it as that division for me. Personally, I just see it as a way to build in that representation that we're changing from the OTM.
Back
Yeah.
to what Laura said earlier, and we call it an ideal theory, like the
Yeah.
ideal.
Mhm.
But the reality is, who's gonna elect you is your precinct. So people, you need to make them most happy, and if you want to stay in that position, is your precinct. And you don't really need to care what anybody else in the town thinks, because you'll keep being elected if you make the precinct happy.
Unless, question coming up, term limits.
Another thing to keep in mind that is sort of intertwined in this, not to confuse matters further, but it may be a deciding factor, is in the event we wanted to have our town council president chosen by the highest number of votes, then having precincts is probably going to throw that option out because they're going to, by nature, get fewer votes because we're only going to be counting the precinct votes. So an at-large, could potentially get more, not necessarily, but it's probably not conducive to having that as the deciding option for town council president. So if that was a factor in your head, that's something to consider.
Well, and I think that, as we're talking, I mean, that backs up into other things too.
It does.
Right? Because what is going to be the role of the president of the council? Is it going to be, are they going to have significant power? Is it going to be ceremonial? Are they going to have equal power to those others, councilmen, council persons? So I think that backs up to that question too, in terms of how is that going to be determined based on, the role.
Right.
I think, again, I don't want to get off topic, I know we're trying to talk about numbers, but I agree with you.
Here I go.
I know. It's just that one thing leads into another, and I think this is going to continue to happen, but I agree
Are
with
you 7 or 9, or do you have a preference?
honestly, I
We
think
skipped
7.
right over Dave.
Sorry, I thought I had you. I've got you at,
We already know.
down, 9, stagger.
Number 9, 333, we got it.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
That's fine. Show up late for one meeting, that's fine. I don't want to interrupt you, though.
No, go ahead. If you,
So, yeah, you're right. So the 7 or 9 part, I'm probably less locked in on than maybe I seemed at first. I do like the symmetry, though, of being able to stagger. I do think that staggering is very important, and I like being able to stagger evenly, which is where I got led to 9, but I'd be fine with 7.
My OCD likes that too.
Thank you. I think I do feel more strongly, and even as we've gone through this, I feel more strongly about the at-large part of it. Not that the points that you've been making about the precincts aren't valid, because I think they are. I just, it's going to be a trade-off game for the rest of the time that we're together, right? And when I look at the trade-offs, what I heard was around the representation, which is again, is I just think that there's a lot of different ways that communication happens these days, and it's just a kind of a different path. And it just feels weird to me that there's a geographic-based representation that we're talking about, but not any of the other factions, to use your word. And it just feels like there's more downsides to it, right? Are we going to be locked into, are people going to be representing their precinct versus the town? Is there the potential to lose some representation because people aren't running? I see the one upside that is being discussed. I see more downsides, and it feels like it's a better, and I like David's point too. Short term, it might make sense to do the precincts, but longer term, and Kevin, you mentioned this, I think in the last meeting, of we want to lock in what's going to be our solution for a good long time. It just feels like there's more upside to the full at-large representation.
again, I'm very open to 7 or 9. I lean more towards 7. Again, I was very dead set against the precincts, a while ago, and we just, decided discussing this. But one of my more important reasons for going to the precincts, I think it's, in my personal opinion, I think it's important for the people that we're going to be putting this in front coming up in another year or so. I think we're going from something that, as a town meeting, open town meeting, when someone can get up if they feel strongly about something, voice their opinion. They may be able to sway or discuss it with their neighbors and get up there and talk about it. I think taking that away and changing something drastically like town council, I think is going to be a shock to a lot of people. it may not be a shock to a ton of people, but there are gonna be a few people, you know, that vote every time, that come out and participate in open town meeting that are gonna be shocked. Am I saying that I wanna put something out there that we're trying to get the most votes for? Well, I think it's something that we need to be able to sell to them. I think being able to say, look, you're gonna have representation, you know, where you can go to somebody, you can speak to them, and you can get them to, you know, for instance, go to town council and, you know, speak your mind sort of through the rep. That's why I lean towards that. But again, I'm so very open to, you know, doing it at large, because I think, to be honest with you, I think, like I said before, either way, town council is the most important thing. I think these little things are gonna work out over the years of being able to get it done. I don't think a precinct representation or an at-large is going to change the track of the town when you keep in town council. I think where the precincts will change stuff is how you do, for instance, the chair. I think if you keep the precincts, in my personal opinion, you almost need to go to one of the at-large almost has to be a separate seat for the chair. That's my take on it. Because especially if you're going to give the chair powers that far exceed the members, or, you know, if they're not, and they're only at, you know, kind of a smoke and mirrors, and they're only here to run a meeting, and they're only here to do certain things and sign documents, I think you're able to say that they can vote between town council. But I think if it's something that's an important position, and you're giving them more power and potentially, you know, being able to make decisions, I think that it almost needs to be elected by the people to know that that person you're electing is going for the chairman of the town council. Where I think at large, you can do that, and if you do the at-large, you can do it by the highest number of votes, you have more options. I mean, obviously, it opens, if you do one thing, it opens the other.
That's a very interesting point, I think, how you elect the
I just think,
chair.
yeah.
And, you know, I'd hate to have a situation, well, I shouldn't say hate, but I can envision a situation where you have a very powerful, strong-willed, I guess you could say, council member who becomes the chair, and he's from whatever district that might be. And, you know, the rest of the town, I can see, would feel perhaps slighted that, because if he is powerful, either because of his personality or the powers we give him through the charter, I can see where that could become a potential problem down the road. You know, in the past, we've had selectmen who've been outsized, I guess you could say, for the role, because they're all theoretically equal, but the reality was they're not. You know, and I think we can look back in history and see that. We had certain board of selectmen who were certainly chairmen, who basically ran the, you know, I wouldn't say ran the show, but they exerted a lot of influence on that board.
I think it all depends on how you do it. If it's a very, in my opinion, if it's a very strong chairman of the town council, and they have a lot of powers, and depending on what we discussed that we're gonna give them for power in the charter, I believe that should be voted on separately. So it has to be somebody at large. It can't be something that the town council goes in and meets as a 7-person body, and then, like you said, have somebody that's, you know, very opinionated, or, you know, can say, this is what we should do, and people go, well, you know, just take it, and now they've kind of pushed themselves into that position. Where if they don't have the power, and it's just more of a ceremonial thing, and it's more to run the meetings and stamp paperwork, then it's not as important. And I think the town council can discuss it among each other, where you may have somebody with experience running a meeting, or you may have somebody with experience of saying, you know, I was on the select board for X amount of years, if that may happen, and say, I know how these meetings run, where they're not affecting policy and or changes in the town. To me, that's not a big deal for the town council to elect in. Again, I know we're talking about depending on how we go, but I think that's an important thing to do. And I don't think you can be the highest vote if you're gonna do precincts. I mean, it's almost impossible to say that. So I think it has to be one of those at large, and I think it should be the chairman, you know, you actually run for chairman of town council.
What is wrong with the town council that is elected voting for their own president?
I'm okay with that if it's not, personally, I'm okay with that if it's not, they don't have an absorbent amount of power above every other member. So if they're not able to make policy, and, like, I mean, some of these charters give the council chairman some serious strength, and, you know, in case of you know, absence of town manager and, you know, where the town manager was sick or the town manager, where they would actually fill that role. I think if you're doing that and you're giving that amount of power, you need to make sure somebody is extremely highly qualified in case something like that happens.
But just because they've drawn papers does not mean they're qualified.
I agree, but I think that if at least the town,
What if they're the only candidate?
problem. But that's.
What if you
did-
have no candidate for president?
I totally understand. It's things we have to talk about.
Lauren's point when she was here was, you know, you also could lose out on a great council member if there's one position, like Watertown has, you
Yeah.
know, where you run for president.
Two
and
people run for
You
president.
got two people running for president, and one doesn't even get on the council at all.
At all.
so-
See, my person, and again, I know I'm throwing all these things out, my personal thing is that position is not powerful, and that eliminates most of that nonsense, where you just have the town council discuss and be done with it. That's my personal take on it, is I don't think that position, the chair, should have this absorbent amount of power where people are having to go and run just for that, because of those reasons.
Yeah.
That's personally how, but I'm just throwing that out there as information, because if we choose to give that person power, then I believe the town should have a direct rep on who they're putting in there because of they have the power.
Yeah.
I say we don't do that. I say we go the way of town council saying, hey, this person has experience, they're well-versed, they know the meetings, and putting that person in. But if something comes down to an absence of town manager, stuff like that, there's other avenues of how those things get filled, whether it be assistant town manager or whatnot.
Yeah.
There should be no
Acting.
reason why, exactly, there should be no reason why town council member who may or may not have any experience at all running a, you know, $80 million budget by the time that this happens and is now running the town because they're chairman of the town council.
Yeah.
But to David's point, you know, if you had precinct counselors, and one of them, whether they were chosen, you know, by town council, they went to that would be on the way they could be chosen, right? Would you want that district counselor, that precinct counselor to be the chair?
Sure.
And then only, you know, with the other precincts necessarily. But that's I think that was the point.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to make, yeah. And
I just-
I think it's important too to consider that, you know, town councils, they're much more powerful than our selectmen are.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, yeah, well, because
Yeah,
they're.
as we all know.
They, they become the legislative branch, right?
Yeah, so, you know, so when you talk about giving someone, when you talk about the chairman, or chairperson, they are much, by their very nature, I mean, that's, even if you make it ceremonial, it's still a pretty damn important role. And it's gonna accrue a lot of responsibility and authority.
They set the agenda. and that's
They set the agenda,
they
yeah,
set the
which-
agenda. And you,
yeah.
technically, if you're not chair, you don't, you know, Laura always obviously asks us what do you want on the agenda. She doesn't have any obligation to do that. So that's.
Do you want our opinions on these issues now? Because I have them, I just.
Yeah, I know. It's a rabbit hole. I mean, it's.
It is we're in a circular loop here, or circular reference.
Can I just point out, though, that, you know, when we were talking about, you know, how, I know Lauren was talking about the wanted their president, chosen by the people, right? That she kind of they made a big deal of making sure that that's why they had the highest votes. They also debated a lot about whether they wanted to be mayor or not. So their president was in some ways serving as that mayor position. In a lot of ways to appease, you know, when they had discussions about this, it was putting that president in a very high position sort of to make the townspeople who wanted a mayor feel like they had sort of that mayor position in there. And so that was kind of the logic behind why they did that. Because if you look, the majority, there are only 4 that are not self-appointed by the town council.
Yeah, as I say, so for me, I'd prefer to see it appointed by the town council, because appointing by number 1 votes or whatever just means it's name recognition. Who's name to recognize? Maybe someone's got a long-standing, deep-rooted name in the town, and they go, oh, I know that family or whatever, I'm gonna vote for that. Like, a lot of that's just name recognition. So I don't think it necessarily picks the best qualified person. I think it just, but I also think, to Kevin's point, I think that the president is just going to be equal vote to everybody else. No additional strength. It's just a figurehead. Someone that runs the meeting.
Yeah, I view them as potentially, there's a couple of things we need to decide, and that's whether we're going to have in a lot of the town council forms of government, the town council president or its representative, if the president does not want to, has a seat on the school committee. We have to decide whether we want to do that. There is some authority with respect to appointing for subcommittees,
I was
for
just gonna
example.
say, yeah, they're gonna have to have some.
There is some,
Authority
yeah, there
to
is
do
some
that.
authority, somebody in
Organizational
charge has
stuff,
to make a
yes,
decision.
yes.
I'm assuming, similar to the way this meeting is run, that it would not be done in a vacuum and it would be done with everybody's input. I would hope, again, I'm maybe being a little idealistic, but that's my view on it. I honestly, I keep going back and forth between precinct and at-large. I think in weighing them, I think at-large, to me, seems to be, for what we're trying to do, the most logical, and again, with my idealistic view that they are acting in the best interest of the town. But I do very much see the point that was made with, it might be an easier sell with precincts. I don't know for a fact, but again, at-large is weighing a little bit heavier than by precinct in my book, but that's where I stand right now.
And I just want to make a couple points too, just listening to all the conversations. I think I'm still for the I want to call it district. Precinct, right? I think some of the issues that we talked about and some of the issues that we heard from people were the notion of accountability and transparency, and I think just having that person provides a little more accountability for the people within the district, right? It gives them that, and it provides a little more transparency, which I think is really one of the main goals of the town council and putting this form of government, recommending this form of government. So I like those two options. As far as electing the president, when Kevin talked about, depending upon the power, if the power is going to be, much more so or a very powerful position, I agree that I think the people need to elect that person, and maybe they do need to run separately. But if we're looking on an equal front within the council, and I know that, there has to be someone to make decisions and run the meeting and things like that, I think that the votes, I think that they need to be voted on throughout the council. You can't really necessarily take into account the number of votes that people got, because, for a number of reasons. I think that person might not be qualified, that person might not want to be chair, just because they got a number of votes. So I think it's important that if the position isn't, if we don't give that position a significant amount of power over all the others, it should be elected within the council.
So I just want to respectfully disagree with the notion that the precincts, by definition, result in additional accountability and transparency. Maybe they would, but the transparency thing, it's still going to be open meetings, and it's still going to be on video, and notes are available, and people will still be able to come in and all that. People would, whether it's somebody in the precinct or not, that if they wanted to go talk individually, that's an option that's always available. So I don't think I agree with that part of the point. And then on the accountability part, I think I agree with you, but I think it was Sandy at first that said it, right? That drives accountability back to the people of that precinct, as opposed to accountability back to the town, right? And as Laura mentioned earlier, right, these people should be elected to serve the town, right?
I agree.
And so if they are being voted on by 200 people in precinct 1 as opposed to 1,200 people across the town, that accountability drives back to that much smaller number of people, and whether they are or are not actually representing the full town, the behaviors change, right? Because you have a a much smaller set of people to serve. So, I hear what you're saying, and I agree with a lot of the points you made. I think I disagree with that.
And I
particular
see, no, I understand what you're saying, but I feel like I'm almost going down the opposite way of the road with you
Yeah.
in terms of the accountability, right? So the accountability coming from not the people, but the people wanting that accountability from the town. Not the accountability coming from the people, but
I lost
through the
you on
people
that.
you elected, right? So you said the accountability comes from a much smaller group within the district.
Yes.
Within the.
Within the precinct.
Precinct, sorry. I will forever do that. I'm trying my hardest. I need a note card in front of me to say precinct. But I literally see it going the other way. Like, that accountability is for those people to go to someone and bring that issue, or whatever it may be, just to have that representative with them in the town council. So I almost see the accountability going the other way and not coming back towards the people.
But
It's
have we
the people
have we
who
had
have the
a
accountability.
have we had a problem? Because to the earlier point, planning board, selectmen, even Kevin, you just mentioned people today can go in front of town meeting, right? I would argue that town meeting is closer to an at-large representation than anything else, because anybody from town can go to town meeting, right? So is there a problem today in any of the boards, elected or appointed, where people don't have somebody local to them that they can go to represent themselves? Is this it feels almost like a solution in search of a problem, as opposed to something where we're saying, like with town meeting, we listed a variety of ways that we believe town meeting is broken and found a different path forward. Is this something that's broken today that we are trying to solve, or is this a problem that doesn't exist that we have a solution that we're trying to fit in?
I just think it doesn't,
will
I just think it
say-
doesn't exist right now because you're not in that, you know what I'm saying, you don't have precincts right now, you don't have that, you don't have a problem because you don't have it. I just think if you create this town council where they are making more decisions than you're able to go to a town meeting, I think one of the problems with, one of the huge arguments with town council is going to be, or for people that are against it, are, you're taking away my right to voice my opinion, all right? You're basically taking all my rights away. Whether it's true, whether it's actually accurate, that's going to be the argument. Is that I like town meetings, I can go there and stand up on my soapbox and rant and rave. I can get 150 of my neighbors to go there and make a decision. Whether you think that's right or wrong, that's gonna be the argument against losing town meeting for a lot of people that love town meeting and don't wanna change. So I think that are we trying to sway those people? I think some of them we're gonna have to. I think they're gonna be the voters. I think there's gonna be a lot of people that are voting that way. So how do you fix that problem, or at least give them something to say, okay, we understand that the town meeting is going by, and we're switching to town council, but we are going to give you some representation. And some of the representation that you can go to, you can meet with, you can discuss district meetings, you can have sit-downs with your precincts and set up, whatever, hearings or whatever you want to call it, so that you can inform people that, that are voting for you, what's going on and why you're choosing to go this way. And look, I would love to see that a person get voted in as a precinct and go there and be able to have, the ability to explain to people, look, I understand this affects us, but this is a good thing for the town. Will it happen? Probably not. They're gonna know how they get voted in, they're gonna know the people who vote them in, and they know if they go that way, they're gonna get voted out. I mean, but it would be nice to be able to go there and have somebody to stand up as a leader and say, look, this is good for the town, and this is why I voted for it. Let the chips fall where they fall. I don't think that's gonna happen, but I think it gives the ability for people to say, at least my voice is being heard, and if you don't like it, I'm gonna vote you out.
But at-large doesn't prevent any of that.
What do you mean at large?
If you have at-large representation, those at-large council people can still have those meetings, can still have those sessions,
I think, but it's gonna be,
but anybody in the town can go to them.
I understand that, but I think as a precinct, you're gonna have, if you're gonna be a representative of precinct 5, and you have X amount of people to, say, vote or deal with or speak, or have them come and meet with you, it's gonna be a lot more difficult just to say, oh, well, as a selectman that do now, I'm just gonna have an open meeting and everybody in the town can come. That's what I think it just narrows it down to more of a representation, that you're losing with town meeting, that you're still gonna be able to hold on to some of it. Now, personally, I like the at-large, I really do. I think it's for the town, in long run, it's probably the best way to do it. I just have I have reserved about just all of a sudden getting rid of town meeting for the people that really love it and that want that representation, I think that's gonna be the biggest hurdle that we're gonna face.
Yeah, but by the same token, though, not many people go to town meeting. So, you know,
Well, and that's great if everybody that votes
and great
on
that
this
the ones
is.
who go vote, but there's a lot of people in town, in my opinion, don't go to town meeting because they find it antiquated and wasted their time, basically. So, you know, I'm kind of wondering if that argument is, we're worrying about this small subset over here. There's a bigger subset of people who say, that town meeting, I don't like it. I want something different. So I'm not really I guess I'm not so concerned about convincing the people who go to town meeting
What I'm more,
that they're losing something by going to town council. To me, that's not all that important, because I don't think that's not they're not the ones who are gonna make the decision, in my opinion.
Well, I think it depends on who comes out and votes.
What's that?
I think it depends on who comes out and
Well, I
votes.
think there's a lot of people who don't like town meeting, who don't go. So, you know, so I think we're excluding there's a lot of people who don't show up at these things, who will show up though, however, I believe, when a major decision like this is being made in town, so.
That's a valid point.
sorry.
I was just gonna say that it sounds like a lot of people are making their decision because they think it's more sellable, which I'm all for. Like, I will, you know, I'm with you, the town council is the most important piece to me, whatever sells that. I just don't know that people care as much. At least the people I've talked to, they don't know what precinct they're in, they don't care if it's a precinct counselor, it's like we kind of joke with a couple friends, it's like, it's not like we have, you know, the Latino section of town, or the, you know, the different demographics in town, we're a small town. There's no even when they, this thing on Facebook with the buy nothing, on the east side and west side, and people were joking about it, because we don't have that in town, we don't have like we don't identify ourselves with our neighborhoods, with our precincts. And so I don't think, to me, I don't think people are going to not vote because they don't have that, or vote because they do have that precinct representation. To me, I don't think that's as big of a factor as you know, as what I'm hearing people think it is.
One of the heavier deciding factors for me, and I think Sandy spoke to it earlier, is if we do go by precinct, there is the potential that we are losing a very good candidate because they just didn't get the highest number of votes within their precinct. They may have beat any of the number of at-large seats that we have, and they are not on that board. And I think that's a problem.
I also think we need to answer the question of what if nobody runs?
Yes.
Well, I think we're gonna have to answer that question.
Regardless.
There's a
I think
lot.
that's
We
always gonna
figure
be
out
that
likelihood
question.
If we are looking for somebody from specific precincts, I mean, there's a much smaller pool.
Mhm.
I think there are precincts that historically do not show up to polls. The numbers are not equal at all. So I think it's a real concern. I think we need to have, you know, have some sort of plan of what's gonna happen if that doesn't, especially if that happens in our very first election.
That would stink.
Personally,
be
I've
so
thrown out-
sad.
I've thrown out some, I've thrown out some options and whatever of both sides and arguments of both sides. Like like I said, I'm perfectly fine with voting for 7 and at large or 9 at large, and I'm perfectly fine with going along with whatever the majority is going to be. And I don't want to say that I'm just taking a back seat from it, but again, it's just, to me, it's just not the most important thing here. You know what I mean? I know there's talk and there's going back and forth and kind of gets everybody's opinions out there to kind of sway people that are maybe up here or up there. Like, I just don't think it's something that is going to so drastically affect us that, you know, we can't come to some type of at least majority on where we're going to go. You know what I mean?
I guess my bottom line is like the at-large is safer. You know, it's a little bit more, less likely that we won't have anybody run for that position. And start off our whole council with that. And
How many Board of Selectmen elections have we had that have been uncontested?
I don't have a problem with contested, I have a problem with nobody running
But
for a
that-
certain precinct. I mean, and there are precincts that just don't take place. Never mind running for election.
Denise, didn't you do I bet you didn't go
Yeah.
by precinct, though, did you?
So I tried to look at it while we were talking,
Yeah.
and she has what looks like it's numbers of voters and how many people attended, but I can't tell what precincts the attendees came from.
Mm.
That's
So-
for town meeting.
Yeah.
Do we have the numbers for town elections?
Those would
Do we
be
have-
publicly available.
Yeah.
You should be able
So
to
I think,
get those.
I think both are in here.
I was wondering if we had it.
Yeah, no, I think both are in this, are in these sheets that I have here.
Yeah.
But I had number of attendance, like I could get percentage of people who attended, but it doesn't break down the attended into which precincts they came from.
Isn't the annual report broken down by precinct?
Meaning what, vote, how they voted?
The votes, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
In election broken down or a town meeting? We can get
It would only be a-
on the website, but they had
yeah.
an older version of last time
The town, the annual report would be the elections they would have in there, and I'm pretty sure they're by precinct.
The town election should be by precinct, because you sign in by precinct, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just didn't know if that was already.
What we're not gonna know is the actual number of people with it. I mean, we should be able to tell, knowing that they're somewhat equal, but we don't really know what the firm percentage of each precinct is, because we don't know the population of each precinct.
Right, but they should be roughly the same.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
So I think looking at the numbers is perfectly fine for sort of trying to estimate.
So what is our process going to be? Like, is the idea that we're going to vote on each of these questions? Vote on the number, vote on the structure, vote, or are we, like, is tonight just a conversation night? What's?
Tonight's a conversation, if we find that we're reaching a consensus, I think we kind of put a pin in it and say, okay, 9 or 7.
Yeah.
We've put a pin in it, but we're not going to vote on it until we've made the other interdependent decisions related to it.
Okay.
So for right now, I'm viewing, if everybody is okay with that, I'm viewing this as a discussion, and we do not have to vote on any. It would be nice if we voted on a couple.
Just want to move your project plan forward
If we, yeah, Jeff, if we could put pins in, a few of these things, I think for, some of these specifically related to the number, there's less that's really dependent upon them. It would be nice if we could make a decision on that tonight. But again, just because we have, doesn't necessarily mean if we get to a point where, we had not contemplated that, we may need to reopen something for discussion.
So I guess to Dave's point, the process would be like, I don't know that we're all going to necessarily agree with the same thing, right? So do you take a poll and see what the majority is, and then vote on the majority vote and say, accept it or not accept it kind of thing?
Yeah, so I
I think we're all kind of like on the same page where we have an opinion, but
is this the hill you want to die on?
right.
That's kind of where we're gonna.
So
What's that?
I got some of the numbers for just, obviously, there's only one election, Tuesday, the April 24th, 2018. So
Good day.
for, they obviously have it broken down by each precinct, 1 through 5. By far, precinct 1 is the highest. I mean, it's 88 for selectmen. Precinct 2 was 66. Precinct 3 was 56. Precinct 4 was,
Oh, jeez.
yeah. Precinct 4 was 52 and precinct 5 was 48.
That's the reality of
so
what we get everything, isn't it?
But that precinct one is.
Precinct 1's always
Where is precinct?
Charlie,
Charlie.
What was that precinct one again?
Charlie,
What was the number?
88. Which is
Total votes.
total votes, well, I mean, that's just for selectmen. I mean, the
But
Board of
so-
Assessors was 44 on precinct 1, planning board was 88.
This was for a town meeting or for the election?
This is for the election on
The election.
24th, April 24th, 2018.
Okay.
Oh, 18. I was thinking 19.
Yeah, 2008. So there's another book down in 2017, I can grab that one too, but
You're not gonna find any better numbers.
it's, well, it's not even so much the numbers, I'm almost gonna go out here and say that precinct 1's, they always, it's one of the highest ones every time. No, even when low numbers, it's the highest one.
I live in Chartley, so everything I said, I'm changing.
66.
Is it?
So Precinct 1?
It's the
one's
second
Charlie?
highest.
All right, that's where I am.
And then 3 and 4 is, 3 and 4 are very close, and then precinct 5 is the
Funny you say that,
lowest.
I don't think it's someone ill defined.
They, 3, 4, and 5 are all
Is that
very
the Attleboro
close.
side?
There's a small jump in precinct 2, and then there's a large jump in precinct 1.
What,
Okay.
And again, for this,
How low is precinct
like
5?
what motion and all that
48
is? Is that all part of Charlie?
altogether, and there's,
The business area, like Dunkin'
Yeah.
Donuts, yeah.
310 votes were cast for the selectmen, that's the highest total. There was 310 for the school committee as well, other ones all have less, but whether or not they just left them blank. So,
Oh, that's really sad. I mean, I knew it was going to be sad, but that's
Right.
really sad.
But I'm hopeful that change, I feel like people want to change, so I'm just
And again-
hopeful that.
I have
this
2019's
bring more
votes.
people,
Yeah.
motivate more
I mean,
people.
we've
and-
heard from
and-
them that they want change, so.
Correct. And so I'm just hopeful that there will be
So let's go to Charter
more
Commission.
participation.
Yeah, I mean, the hope is that people might have been apathetic because they felt like the decisions they were making weren't affecting
Kinda hard because there's
enough
so
or making
many.
much of a change, right? So,
No, I agree. I would
One,
agree
two,
with both of
three,
you.
4,
Yeah.
5.
So in the special election that we had for
Yep.
a contested selectmen's race a couple of years ago,
One,
so
two,
June 6,
3,
2017,
4,
there were
5.
almost 1,900 total votes cast. Was that?
I'm sorry, DD, I just said DD.
Oh, and of that, almost
Board of
1,900,
Selectmen ran the same way.
522 were precinct 1, 470 precinct 2, 277 precinct 3, then 356 and 255.
What's 2? Does anybody know what 2 is by any chance? Is that Barrowsville maybe, or?
That's where I am, precinct 2, so that would be the end of Oak Street, down that end.
I know 5's my
It
area.
might
Are you
pull
in 5?
Barrowsville, I don't know.
4.
So in 2019, for the Charter Commission, precinct 4 was the highest.
I got Peter recently there in Norton, I got a collection of articles, and this is a one from 1977, and back then, 1,929 voters turned out for Monday's election, and Raymond Paternotte and John Thorne were elected to 3-year selectmen seats, and then converted to 2-year terms, and the 3-year selectmen race attended. Paternotte received 1,083 votes, Drain 1,005 votes, and FinCom Chairman Harold Pastor-Lenders with 912 votes.
Thanks, Peter.
You're welcome.
thanks, Peter.
All right.
Yep. All right. Poland Manson, I had the Peter channel back in 1977, I would report, but we didn't have any Facebook, we didn't have any Twitter, we didn't have any YouTube.
Yeah.
Thank you, Peter.
Go back in time.
Yeah.
So for the sake of right now and putting pins in things,
Yeah,
do we put a pin in the, it's either 7 or 9, and then put a pin in the, ooh, we have more work to do on the at-large versus, versus precinct?
I personally, we have to come up with, I just think everything comes, there's so
I
many things
think
that
we've
come up.
heard it all. I
Yeah,
think we
yeah.
just need to vote it, right?
Yeah.
It felt like 4, 4, and 1 on the,
I mean, unless people think that sleeping on it's going to help the matter, but
I just think we have to come up, we have to get that, in my opinion, we have to get the actual number so we can go forward. I mean, I think there's so many things that are gonna come off, whether it be numbers or whether it be precinct or whether it's,
yeah, we've got to get into
yeah.
the term of the commissioners. We want them staggered. There's quite a few things that are. Now, that being said, we can still have those conversations, but we should probably be prepared to have a vote on them next week. If people are
Next
not.
week.
Next meeting. You're coming next week, didn't you know? But if somebody wants to put in a motion, I will accept a motion if somebody wants to make a motion on the floor.
I'll make a motion that we vote on the number of council people we want.
Do I have a second? A motion has been made to select the number of counselors.
I'll second it.
I'd like to move to table that vote, because I am not prepared to make a decision until we resolve the at-large and precinct.
Okay.
Can I make a motion that we? Make a motion that we vote on the, whether or not we do at-large or precinct.
I'm not prepared to vote on that today either. I've heard some great arguments. I would like to think about that some more.
I think it's fair, and
Yeah.
One other thing that I think I am hearing, do we have consensus that, does anybody feel that we should have a president that has so much power that they need to be chosen by the people? Or are we all kind of leaning in make it more of a ceremonial, they're gonna have more power, but, and then if that's the case, would we want the town council to self-appoint their own chair, their own president?
that is my preference.
That's my preference.
Mine as well.
Me too.
All in favor?
Hearing consensus on that.
Grasping at whatever we have.
So can I throw in just an interesting twist or an interesting question?
Take the wings
Can-
back in.
When they elect when the council members elect the president of the council, does that have to happen for the whole whatever number year of term it is? Or can you do that annually?
That's a decision that needs to be made. We need to decide what the term of the president is going to be, and that can be
So a separate.
1 year, that could be 2 years, that could be the full, if we have a 3-year term, it could be the full term of their
All right.
appointment.
I didn't mean to throw a wrench in it, but I
Yeah.
think we're on the same page on the first question.
Yes.
And can I just ask one more question about the
Sure.
process? So if we vote on, say, how we're appointing the president, and then something that we decide later makes any of us.
Yes.
Can we reopen that
Yes.
discussion even though we voted on it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's only fair because right now, we know what's in front of us.
Yeah.
Hindsight is 20/20.
Yeah.
And if there is, obviously I don't want to go ripping open
Yeah.
a lot of things, but yeah, I think if we are in agreement that there is significant additional evidence that was not taken into account when a decision was made, we can certainly reopen it.
Got it. Thank you.
Can I make a motion that we take a vote on how the town council president or town council chairman is chosen?
So
I
will
would
you make
second.
your motion to
More
have the
specific.
council, however you want to make a motion to have the council president voted on by town council?
Sure.
Okay.
I would second that.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion that the town council president is chosen by the town councilors? Hey, look at that.
Wow, we got
Is that
something.
unanimous?
We got a vote. It is unanimous.
See, and this is why I wanted to take.
2
these
down,
votes, 'cause I
100 more to
think
go.
The closer we can get to consensus, the better.
said
Like,
that
I don't
would
want it to be a
happen?
4-4 split, like,
Yeah.
4-5 split
Because then Kevin
for
says that
stuff.
decision.
Yep. Well, and the fact that you were leaning the way that's opposite that I was thinking, I appreciate the fact that you want to consider all of the additional information, so,
I'm a rational person.
yeah. But like I said, I could see your side too, so I will give it some reconsideration. I've already given it enough I have a compromise if nothing else works,
Laura,
so.
would you do me a favor? Could you send around that could you, because I know you read it for us. Could
Yes.
you email that to us? Or put it in the Dropbox or?
Yes.
Good idea.
Yeah, I'll just put it in an email.
Digest it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I did it, I was thinking 9 seats. I think it still works with 7. It's cleaner with 9, but
Oh, type A.
yeah, I know. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's the OCD. Yep. All right.
Do we also have consensus around staggering the terms? I know we didn't have a lot of conversation about it.
I think we should probably talk about the term.
Okay.
Probably is going to dictate a little bit of that, only because, for example, if you want staggered, then we cannot have 2-year terms with biennial elections. Can't stagger 2 years. So
Well, you can stagger 2 years if you do every year,
it'd have to be annual elections. If
Yeah.
it was biennial, no.
but you don't have, just because you have 2-year terms, you don't have to have biennial.
No, but she's saying if you had that combination.
If you had the combination, gotcha.
Yeah.
All right.
So-
I think annual elections might be asking a bit much.
Yeah, can we talk about that? a little
Sure.
bit? That seems to change a lot of things. in
Yes.
terms of other boards and committees, that I feel like are happy with to it. The 2 years election. And those are typically in the fall, to offset the state elections. I would prefer the annual.
I like the annual too. We have now.
I like annual with staggered terms, so it's not a huge election every year, whether it's for the town council or any other elected bodies that we decide to create.
Right.
I like staggered terms across all of them, and then it makes it so it's not as big of an issue.
Yeah, one of the benefits of annual is then you can consider a 3-year term. And we don't have to change the terms of a lot of the boards, because those are all 3 years as well. So.
Okay.
I will take a motion on how frequently our elections are to be held.
You did such a good job last time.
I'm good. Someone else can do it.
Not Cindy, since she articulated.
I will move that we recommend annual elections.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion on the matter? Are all of those, is everyone in favor of keeping annual elections? It is unanimous. Look at us.
It's a streak.
All kinds of decisions being
We are
made here.
so good.
Let's find out.
Do you think people?
Where's the low-hanging fruit we can pick off?
People watching at home appreciate that humor.
I don't
Where's the
know.
low-hanging fruit?
I'm hoping somebody is at home cheering us.
I know some are.
Yeah. It would be nice to know that, oh, yes, my choice won. Okay, so we have annual elections. Let's talk about term. Does that seem to be the next natural progression?
Sure.
Okay. So we have annual. We are not limited, then we could choose, so 2, 3, or 4 seems to be
The majority,
the trend,
the trend.
with 2 being overwhelming, interestingly, and actually biennial elections being the majority. But just because they are, doesn't mean we have to do that way.
I think what you also notice too is that the mayor form of government definitely always is going to have the annual
Yep.
2 terms, just because that fits in with that.
Right.
And so the majority of these do have a mayor. The ones that have a town manager, when I kind of divided it out, they're a little more split in terms of their time and the frequency of elections.
Do you have the numbers on those? That's okay. If you had it right there, that's fine.
There are 5 town managers with annual. Six with biennial.
Okay.
So this is a question, I guess, so 3 years staggered, for example. So at the initial election, you'd have some 1-year terms, some 2-year terms, and some 3-year terms that people be running for?
One of them
Is
is
that
by
how?
number of votes, so like the top 3 vote getters have a 3-year term, the next get a 2-year term, and the lowest get.
That's interesting.
Oh, I see.
So it's kind of like that for a concrete way of divvying it up.
Right. Okay, but that's how it worked, though,
It's
so.
sort of arbitrary, yeah, it's like
Yeah.
any time we start a committee, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that goes in the transition plan, and that's
You could say
the
alphabet.
part that we're gonna have to,
So I
Okay,
think,
so there's a methodology, whatever it might be, but there's a methodology.
so I'll throw it out there that probably we're at a 3 or 2. I mean, is anyone else seeing anything different than that? Does anybody want more or less than 3 or 2? So where does everyone stand,
2 or 3. I mean, I think that sounds reasonable, because you want them to be in long enough to learn what their job is, but, you know.
That's why I was kind of leaning towards 3.
I was too.
And I like 3 because I think we heard a lot of times, both in here and in other things in town, that people don't like to run for things. They're willing to serve, but they don't want to run, right? So. if you go
Cut down
3
on-
If you go 3, they have to run 50% less frequently.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm kind of thinking out loud, but I was just thinking that if you went with if you had 2-year terms, you may get more people to run.
Because it's not as big of a commitment.
Yeah, well, because they're not quite sure if they want to get into it for 4,
Yeah.
to be 4, but
The trade-off.
I'm just throwing that out there, but
Yeah.
I can see what someone says, you know what I mean, I can always do 2 years. I'm not so sure I want to do more
You
than
could actually
that.
change it if you wanted to, right? You can go with 2-year term and try it and.
Nothing says you can't
Well,
quit
it's not
after
that
2
easy.
if you hate it.
Well, I
You
think,
can always resign.
I think with this, with the town council, I think it just, again, we know it's such an important role in the town. We know it's gonna be such a important thing for decision-making. I think the argument for 3 is, like you said, you get in there, you learn the job, it's gonna take you a while.
It's a year.
Yeah, it's gonna take you a while just to get acclimated to how things are working and how's everything, you know what I mean? And then that next year, you may find you had you hit your stride, and then you back up again for election. With I think the 3rd year, you can, personally, I think you can finally decide whether or not this is something that you're gonna rerun for, or you've served your 3 years and, you're gonna move, so.
Yeah.
I just think 2 comes quick. I mean, we've already met for going on a year, and I mean,
Yeah, I just go back to my original, I just, we don't see a lot of political activity in this town.
Yep.
And I just keep going back to that I don't want us to, 9 might sound like a great number, but I'm just is it realistic, and that's all I'm throwing out there. I don't have the answer, but I just think you're more likely to get 9 if you want 2-year terms, for example. And so I think it's perhaps more realistic.
So along with that, I don't think we're gonna see a whole lot of turnover, even if we had, no matter what we do, right? I think
We haven't gotten to that question yet,
Even if we had
term
9 at large, right, that would mean we need 18 to run in order to have the whole board turnover. So this idea that things are gonna constantly turn over no matter what we do, I don't think is gonna necessarily happen. And I also think we have to remember how much power these people are gonna have and how hard it is to get rid of someone once they're in, right? And so that would be maybe an argument for 2 versus 3.
Right, right.
But we,
Because you're really stuck with, for 3 years, it's a
Oh.
long time to be stuck with someone.
That was,
I thought you were getting into like the more term limit question, right?
No,
But
just being, again, stuck
2
with
versus
somebody,
3.
yeah, that was the argument I
can
was
definitely
going to
see it
make
as a
is,
selling- I can definitely see it as a selling point in 2 years, like, if you really don't like them, you can get rid of them in 2 years.
Right, because we know how hard it is to get those signatures to recall something.
So, just thinking about the statement of the power that any individual on this council would have, totally agree the council itself has a significant amount. But does whether it's 7 or 9, does any one person
By themselves.
by themselves, to me, that's the benefit of it being larger, right? Is that it avoids some of that.
Back to what David was saying, like sometimes
Right.
we've had people who, even though they're one of 5 or 7 or
Yeah.
whatever it happens to be, seem to really.
Bring an
their
outsized
presence on
influence, yeah, okay.
But I would be just as upset with the other remaining 6 or 8 that didn't speak up against the one dominant.
Yeah, I think the bigger numbers makes it less, right, with 5, you can have 1, not 5.
well, I think that's one of the arguments for staggered terms too, if people that are there are staying, and you're only, say, like Dave was saying, 3 are coming in, you kind of have an established base where you're not gonna all of a sudden turn over 9 people all in one smack, and then one person can be that dominant, because they come in, it's all new, and it's like we're starting from fresh again, where I think that if you have 6 of them that are already there, if you choose to go with 9, I think it's gonna kind of work itself out with the election anyway of the chairs, that it's gonna be more difficult for somebody to come in and just overrule or take over per se, because of those staggered.
I like the staggered too, because to try to vote for, well, depending on if we go precinct or whatever, but they mean to, certainly if they were all large, I mean, a lot of people at once, and even at the precincts, that's a lot of people to vote for. So the staggered definitely, narrows that pool down.
Do we have a consensus on that? Staggered?
Staggered?
That
I
we
have no
want-
problem making another motion.
That we, that we want whatever
I'm all for
number it is to
staggered.
be staggered, I'm for staggered.
Yeah, it doesn't, I mean, we're not discussing the numbers, but at least if we know, so I'll make a motion that we take a vote, however you want to word it. I don't know. You're better at it than I am. That
I
was
move
staggered.
that we have staggered terms for our town council members.
Second. Did you have to say something to make it official?
All in favor? Any further discussion?
All in favor, yeah?
Good.
Good. All right, so staggered. So if we end up with 2 years staggered annual election, we will be the only town with that structure. That's the one I asked you about earlier, which it seemed weird nobody had chosen that. Yeah, there's not a
Dave, did the
single
numbers-
other
did the
town
numbers
with
work out?
2 years staggered annual elections.
I mean, we can do whatever we want.
Exactly.
I do like the 3, but
Yeah, I like 3 as well, because I think it lets people really learn their job and perhaps do it better.
It does, but what if it's somebody you don't like and you want them gone?
There's always somebody that you don't like.
Yeah, right.
I mean, honestly, like, we can't recall people that we don't like just because we don't like them. Like, the recall process should be difficult because they've been elected by the town, but, I don't know.
And I agree with Dave, I think, like, if you're not given, even though if that one person is difficult during those 3 years, and it's something that the town's noticing, it should take care of itself. If we don't have anybody to run, it may not, but you have potentially 6 or 8 others that are gonna say, okay, you can say what you wanna say, but the 8 of us are gonna outrule the majorities are gonna outrule.
And I like the idea of 3 too, and for the reasons that were mentioned down here. And I don't like the idea of making a decision based on, one person who may do or may not do something, or one person that someone might like or someone might not like, right? Because that person that you might like, the other half of the town might not. So I feel like making a decision based on that, and that's gonna happen, like she said. I mean, it's gonna happen no matter what. So I feel uncomfortable making a decision based on those things. I'd rather make a decision based on what would really work. And my personal opinion is I think the 3 works with the staggered, with the I feel like it's kind of that revolving door, the 3, up for numbers. I kind of like the 9, but I know
The
we're not
3
ready to
lends
do that
itself
yet.
better to the 9.
Correct. 3s and the 9s. But that would be my reason.
3 also works just as well with 7 as 2 does. I'm just
It
saying
does.
there's a remainder either way.
Yeah.
Whatever you say.
It's just not as clean.
And I also do like with the 3, it's a smaller portion of the board that turns over every time. So with 2, it's roughly half the board
yeah.
every election.
Me too.
I'm trying to figure out how that works with, the precinct counselors. So you just have 2 1 year, 2 1 year, 1 last year. And yours would only turn over every 3 years.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking about that too. There'd be some years when, if it's just your counselor, and if you did it by precincts, there'd be some years, I guess, you wouldn't vote.
You'd still have to
You'd
vote.
still vote, yeah.
Others,
Well, if it was that way.
Yeah.
in other positions, planning and whatever. yeah.
Yeah.
There would always be at least 1 precinct and at least 1 at-large.
That would be 7, right? That'd be
True.
2 at large.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's true. I was
Oh,
assuming
right,
that.
so there'd be
And
some
you
years,
did
that
not.
I think
You
in
went
theory,
that
you'd have some
way.
years.
Okay.
This might work
Another
itself out.
vote for 9.
Yeah. I was gonna say, this might work itself out.
I'm fine with the staggered, I just think it solidifies more, I think.
I see what you're doing over there.
I mean, the 3 and the 9 is, you know, even if you do precincts, the 3 and the 9 are gonna be worth it, you know.
It just works.
You know, the other thing for 3 is if I'm gonna take the time to run for a position, I wanna know that I'm gonna have a chance to kind of show myself before I can get ousted for maybe one bad decision that people don't like or something, you know?
Redeem yourself?
Hmm?
To redeem yourself?
To redeem myself.
Yeah, like I said, I only threw the 2 years out only because it's a selling point, I think, because a lot of people, because they are giving up a lot by going away from town meeting, so.
Yeah.
So I don't really agree with the 2, but I'm, I just, as a selling.
I like that you're making the counter argument, though.
I'm fine with it. Oh, you mean you're going? That's right.
Well-
What are we going on? I move that we have 3-year terms for the council.
Second.
Any further discussion? Sorry. No, I was just afraid we hadn't given everybody enough time to flesh it out. All in favor? Unanimous.
We are.
We are on fire.
I do like the idea, and I don't know where this fits in, I do like the idea of the council and the president. I do like the idea of the council voting the president, and I know we already established that. But I almost like the idea of the council doing it every year.
Yep.
They would have
Yeah.
to, because
Yeah.
staggered,
Yeah.
it almost, means they
Right,
really want to give those new people a chance.
right, exactly.
Make a motion, make a motion.
Every city.
I agree, it solves, I mean, it solves itself with that, you almost, you have to do it.
Yeah, has to be,
And it should be too, to be honest, I mean, you can't, you know, you gotta let new people come in and now they're being represented by a chair they didn't even get a chance to vote on. It's
Yeah,
not really-
no, I
That's not
I
fair.
agree.
agree with that.
Yeah.
Not fair for the town council, you know, for their inner workings.
I move that we.
I was gonna say, let Janie move it.
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor of having the, I forget what we're even
Council
voting.
president, one-year
Council
term.
president is 1-year term. All in favor?
Oh, sorry.
Unanimous.
It's like momentum.
Who said it wouldn't happen?
All right. I don't see why I have that question. Or was it on the, is it actually on the agenda? Nope. All right.
Term limits?
Okay. All right, yeah, let's talk about term limits.
I'm ready to make a motion on that.
It seems like the next natural progression. I don't know where else to take this.
Natural way to move to a halt again.
Yeah.
I'm always torn on.
Yeah.
So you just
Term
open
limits.
the table for discussion on it, is that what?
Yeah, let's talk about term limits.
I am definitely for them. The how many, I'm kind of ambivalent to.
Okay.
3, 4 terms, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm of the same opinion. I do like them. I just think anybody sitting on any one board in any position for too long, it's not good for growth, moving forward, discussion, et cetera. Given we have now voted on 3-year terms, I could go probably 3 3-year terms or 4 3-year terms, so either 9 or 12 years.
Would
If
they be
we
able
were-
to run again after a span
A
of time
spell out.
out? I'm just thinking, we have
I had a
so much
compromise.
trouble getting
Yeah.
volunteers
Yeah, that
and
makes
people to
sense.
run.
I had a compromise to this one, too.
I am generally in favor of term limits for the reasons that you say. I just fear we're going to get rid of, we could get rid of somebody who's really good.
Yes. And I have a compromise to this.
I'd love to hear it.
So my compromise was, or my solution was that you have, the timeline to draw papers, you actually have 2 different deadlines. If a new person has not drawn papers by X date, an incumbent who has reached their term limit then has, let's say, an additional week to draw papers, so that that seat won't go.
You stole that from another charter. I remember reading that.
I was gonna,
No, so the other one, that one I thought of myself, but
Oh, I thought.
I was gonna
thought we
suggest the
saw
same
that.
thing.
the
Yeah.
compromise on the no 2 from any one
Yeah.
area, that was something I thought I stole, but I actually thought I came up with I actually think I told you out in the parking lot.
Oh, maybe that's what it was.
Yeah, at one point. So it could potentially eliminate the seat going empty. I know it doesn't fulfill my ideal of having a term limit. I'd prefer they sat out for a term.
Yeah.
But I would rather not have a seat have to be appointed.
Yeah.
I'm torn on term limits because I really think that term limits should come from the voters and their say, especially those elected officials. And I know that, it doesn't always work out that way when you don't want someone in a position, but I just really feel that those term limits for elected officials should come from the voters. And if the voters vote to, keep someone in or get someone out, I think that's important.
Well, I agree with that point.
Yeah.
I agree with that 100%, but I think if we were to go with precincts, I think that sort of flies in the face of that, because now you're not letting everybody vote to get somebody out, it's only that one precinct. So I think until we resolve the precinct question, I'm not quite sure I would feel comfortable on this, in the sense that, I guess I'm against term limits in general, because I agree with you that the voters should make that decision. But if we have precincts, and one person keeps getting elected every 3 years because he gets his precinct, and I have no say in that whatsoever, then I guess I want term limits, perhaps.
Right, because he's on, even though you're not voting for him, he's representing, he or she is representing.
Right, and I have no say whatsoever.
Why are you not voting for him? Or her?
I'm not,
You're not his precinct.
Run against them.
maybe I'm on the precinct.
Not in the precinct.
I think
Oh.
my house.
Yeah, I
We're
see.
stuck with 4 people that we can't vote for, right? What do you do precincts? There's 4 people that I have no choice, no say on.
Yeah.
I think the 3 things that I kind of came up with the term is, one, I'm afraid that, like Janie was saying, that if the person's doing a great job, I think it should be the voter who decides on whether or not, it's time for this person to take a break and be gone. I think we saw it last time. The second thing is, I think that we don't have the participation right now to be, I think, nitpicky on whether or not people are going to serve for a long period of time. And the third thing, I think, is how many times have we got, I know recently we have, but when have we really gotten to the point where multiple people are served 12 years or more? We can think of a few recently, but there's not like it's the selectmen are staying, all 5 are staying for an absorbent amount of time, that they're in there for 15 years, all 5 all together, and they're having this little, thing. I think it works itself out with either people are, kind of move on, people, other commitments come up and they don't run again, and then you kind of get a turnover. I think that's something that we can give the voters and let them decide on whether or not they want to keep someone in on the job they're doing. I do agree with you, though, that it also changes drastically on if we do precinct votes. Where I think it's at large, I don't think we need to get into that. I think the voters can choose, because it's all at large. If they're not liking, the person that's in there, or they want change, that the person's been there for 12 years, I think they'll vote it out. But I think the precinct thing's going to be a lot different.
And along with that, I think the nice thing about voting, if you were able to vote for 3 people in any one election, the reason we don't have, a lot of times people say we don't have contested races is because nobody wants to run against an incumbent, right? But if you have 3 incumbents, throw a 4th person in there, it's a lot, they're not going head to head. Right? So if you had 3 people running at large, you had another person thrown, they were all incumbents, another person thrown in there, it would be a lot easier to as incumbents than it would be otherwise. We could also let the 10-year charter review committee decide this, since it's not gonna be for 12 years anyway, you don't need to worry about it.
So for what it's worth, I'm on the no term limits side of the equation as well. I think you put it well, and it's not like a cable news talking head, right? We have term limits. They're called elections, and I'm really nervous about putting anything in there that's going to make it harder for people to serve. And so for the same reasons I was arguing against the precincts, I would argue against the term limits.
But Dave, to your point though, if we had precincts, you have no say in, you're against the term limits.
Yeah.
So you could have somebody who's been running for 20 years, and you have no say in that whatsoever. Because if we have precincts.
Yeah.
He wants
Oh,
at
you mean
large.
precincts too, right, right.
Even if we don't have precincts, you could have someone that runs 20 years.
I don't know how you make the decision, I'm sorry.
My issue is that we're assuming that everyone's watching all the town council meetings and is well educated on how everyone's voting and knows exactly who the good ones and who the bad ones are. 90% of it is going to be just name recognition, and name recognition is just, who's a town council member? Oh, so-and-so has always been on town council. He's been on there for 100 years. He's going to be good. I'm going to vote for him. That's just the nature of the beast. It's recognizing the name.
You don't think that if we have votes on, so right now we vote on major issues 2 times a year. Do you think, and people have vested interests in a lot of those things, and I think if town council meetings are happening more frequently, people are more inclined to pay attention because there are important votes going on in those meetings, and I think there would be more involvement. I could be wrong again. I might be naive.
We get 1% now at the 2 meetings that we have.
So I guess I just look at the worst case scenarios for either side. Right? The worst case scenario for not having term limits is somebody who wants to continue to serve has the opportunity to continue to serve. If they're doing a great job or doing a bad job, that's a decision the voters get to make every 3 years. And at the end of the day, they're one of 7 or one of 9 voices that are in that room. The worst case for having term limits is you wind up with potentially a capable person who's not allowed to run, and a seat either is going empty or an inferior candidate, by whatever definition of inferior we want to use, winds up in that seat because the other person wasn't allowed to run. If I weigh those 2 worst case scenarios, or at least as I would define worst case scenarios, the worst case scenario for having the term limits is worse than not.
So, I mean, I think you can fix the empty seat issue, right? We talked about, like, Laura's solution, I think, was a good one, or you could have some other mechanism, but I think you could fix the empty seat issue pretty readily. As far as the inferior, I don't know, how do you judge that, right? You're gonna give them a chance before you know they're inferior. But, so a lot of it is too, like, who's more connected in the town, has more touch points with people. There might be someone who'd be a great candidate and a great council member, but maybe doesn't have they're not active in the town sports, they're not active in the school system, they're not active, like, right? But they
Name
might be
recognition.
extremely bright
Yeah.
and just don't have a lot of connect points, that they're not gonna get the votes because they don't have those connections necessarily against someone who's an incumbent who's been there doing it for 20 years, 21 years.
And again, it's not gonna be, well, depending on how you do it, I mean, it wouldn't necessarily be a head-to-head race. You wouldn't be going against one single incumbent and trying to beat out that incumbent.
You'd be going up
Essentially,
against
you'd
3.
have 5 people running for 3 spots.
If we don't do precincts. They're all at large.
I mean, that's the biggest detriment to, right, that what we have right now is people don't want to run against an incumbent. And having multiple votes each year, I think, eliminates that. That's makes it easier.
But how does it help that person that doesn't have a lot of connections?
Because they don't need as nearly many votes to
Sure they do, against incumbents.
Not if it's like five people, you're choosing three. You don't need a majority of that way, right?
Right, but what are the chances that that person that doesn't have a lot of connection points is gonna beat the other three out? Or the
Didn't we
four
see
out?
that
There's a lot more.
last
No, there's a lot of- yeah.
Selectmen's election?
Huh?
It was two relative unknown candidates compared to the long-term incumbents. Ton of people turned out.
And I think it's even more likely, again, the more people you have, the more positions you're going in any single election.
I think it's gonna depend on what's going on at that specific time.
Yeah.
If the person's running and it's kind of a smooth election and you're not gonna get the turnout, you may not, that person may not fare well, but like what happened last time for the selectmen, I think it's too hard to predict. I mean, talking about, things with elections and what's going on and all that other stuff, and those things will work itself out, in my opinion. But I think, Sandy, I think you have a valid point for going with an at-large seems to make more sense if we're going to do 3-year with the elections the way we're gonna do it. And the reason
And no term limits.
And no term limits, because I think to me, term limits would be a lot more important if we were gonna do precincts. Because if your precinct 1 is having somebody there that's, Chartley, that well-known, well-connected in Chartley, that's got 12, 15 years in, and the people are saying, okay, enough's enough. They have no they have no say whatsoever on whether that person's gonna be voted out or not. So, you can't say an election's gonna fix that. That's where I see the problem with almost needing term limits if you're gonna do precincts, where if you don't, and they're at large, the elections in a whole, in a town, they can see your track record, they can see what you voted on, they can see what you're doing for the town, and let the election fall where it's gonna fall. So I don't wanna say I'm swaying more towards that, but it makes more sense in this.
More than we're talking about this, that if we ever went precincts, I would not want 7.
You would not want what?
I would not want 7, because that would mean there are years that I might not vote for a
Yep.
counselor. That would mean I only get to vote for 3 out of 7. I think that's.
That's a very,
only have a
very
choice
valid
of 3
point.
out of 7 counselors that are deciding everything for my town.
That's a very, very, very valid point. That's not fair to anybody to do precincts in 7. If we do precincts, you almost have to do 9 if you're gonna have that discussion with precincts.
And then at least I get 5, right? I just like the majority. I can vote for the majority.
So I guess vice versa, if we're gonna do the 9 with the precincts, I'd rather do the 7 without.
I agree.
Do you know what I mean?
I agree.
Are we making progress here?
I agree. I think if you do 7 at large, that makes sense. If you do 9, you could get away with doing the precincts, but you can't do 7 in the precincts, if that makes sense.
I am totally fine doing 9 with precincts. Haven't I heard that before?
That was the opening statement, I believe.
9 with precincts, and I get term limits.
I'm just a proponent of term across the board. I think we should have it on a national level, I think we should have it on a local level.
Are we gonna extend that to other boards and commissions?
Extend what?
If you
Oh,
ask-
See, I
term
think-
limits, yeah.
I don't think we have to do boards and commissions the same way we do the council, because the council is the legislative branch, and the boards and commissions are part of the executive branch, so we can talk about them
I'm wondering
separately.
If that's also what people are thinking.
Yeah.
If you're for term limits, is it across the board?
For me, my personal opinion, yeah.
Yes.
Well, I understand that where if you want, you do all, but like the planning board or boards that are literally either don't have contested races for how many years on end, or that we're actually going out and appointing people to them because there's nobody to run. I mean, I think,
So I think with
that's
any,
where it scares me.
I think with any of these, like, if it's not contested, I think you have to allow the incumbent to stay in the position if no one else is interested in stepping up for it, right? But if even one person's interested in stepping up, then that term limit's been reached.
But
But then why wouldn't you let the voters decide?
That's, exactly. Because if, say, for instance, the incumbent hits the 12, just let's say we're gonna use 12 years, so 3, 4, so we hit the 12-year mark. One person runs. Let's just say that person running against the incumbent, people don't want. So now you're gonna automatically drop the incumbent out and guarantee that person to be in, where the voters are probably, I don't want this person.
So if I'm a voter and I know that someone's running that I don't like, then I'm gonna rally some troops and get another person run against them.
That's great in,
Great.
but that's great. But that's great in theory, but I think
Well,
that,
yeah, I guess, but,
oh, I think that's great in theory, but I think that's just not, I mean, it's just not feasible with this town. I mean, we don't have the history of people being able to go out and run. And then you're asking them to run now in an election they are going to face.
yeah, it's not,
Head to head.
it's not an issue that I'm going to, die on the hill on, but it's just something I feel, I like across the board, on a national level, on a local level, all across the board, with all of it. But that's just my personal preference.
I would more, on that same argument, I would be more willing to have like that compromise if 2 people took out papers for that position of the incumbent. So at least the townspeople have a choice.
Yeah,
So if you
I'd
have the
okay with that.
incumbent and then two people are gonna run against them, and then you can drop the incumbent from that, because they have a choice on those 2 people. They have some type of competition, they have some type of selection, I'm more okay with that. But I'm not okay with the person hitting 12 years, one person decide, well, I'm gonna throw my papers in because I'm a shoo-in, because I'm gonna kick this guy out or girl out. And now the people are stuck with, unless they're gonna get a write-in or rally the troops, which is highly unlikely.
I think it's a good compromise. You have to ask Laura if it's possible.
Again, though, I think we're forgetting that it's not necessarily gonna be one person running that
True.
All right, not one seat necessarily.
Uh-oh.
Someone calling in?
Yes, but wait, we were talking about, we were hoping that there were people cheering us on. So, I got a message from Janine White, who is watching. Subject line was cheering you on. And asked, one suggestion, please have the microphone from the single desk turned towards Sandy and Keith so that we can hear them. Thank you, Janine.
I can attest the acoustics.
Thanks for cheering us
I
on.
don't get nearly close enough to the microphones.
She also goes on to say, thank you all very much for your time and effort, hopefully moving the town towards town government into this century. She's watched every meeting, she's thankful for the diligence and the hard work, and she applauds us.
Thank you, Janine.
Thank you, Janine.
So, and thank you for the suggestion on the microphone. Sandy and Keith need to speak up now. All right, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt the meeting, but it's nice somebody was cheering us on.
Yeah.
What am I
Does she have an
bringing to
opinion on term
Lauren?
limits?
What's that? What's that?
Does she have an opinion on term limits?
I think I'm not ready to vote on anything to do with term limits until we can narrow down whether or not we're gonna go at large and, or precinct and the number, because I think it changes my vote
Okay,
because of those things.
fair.
Yeah, I feel like I have to think about the combinations that are going to happen in each of the scenarios, right? What those elections would look like.
I think if you give me A, I'll give, I can give you B, but if you don't, I'm never gonna get past something if you don't give me what we're actually gonna be talking about. And right now, we don't have the exact number. We don't have whether or not it's gonna be at large or by precinct. So I can't tell you if term limits can really come into play.
And just to go back to the precinct versus at-large conversation, that there's a point made by, I think, David and Sandy, that I didn't consider the first time around, but it really hit me hard, was if we have 5 people, one from each of the precinct with however many at-large, there's gonna be 80% of the town that can't vote for certain members of the council. And that just fundamentally feels wrong to me. It still doesn't discount the valid arguments on the representation and all that, but the fact that for a majority, at least of the numbers that we're talking about, for a majority of the council, 80% of the town won't be able to vote for those people.
So is that then taking away people's choices even more? Like, we're talking about town meeting and the concern that we want to give people a voice
Yeah.
at the polls, right? If you are only able to vote for little half, whatever it is, a little less than half, a
Yeah,
little over
half
half,
percent
you know,
or-
then of the people representing you.
Yeah. That, I
Yeah,
hadn't
very-
considered
very
that when
strong.
we were
It's
going
a very
through,
strong
but
point.
David-
You'd still be voting for more than half, though. You'd be voting for 5 people, 5 of the 9, if that's what we're,
If we go
or 3
9.
of the 7.
Right.
Yeah, but still, for those other people, they're getting elected without a voice from 80% of the town. Each individual precinct representative has, again, 4/5, right, 80% of the town has no voice into whether or not they're elected. And that just, if we're talking about having a voice and being represented, it feels backwards to what we're trying to do there. So I know it was a great point that I thought got kind of lost in the shuffle of the other conversation, that I just wanted to kind of bubble up to the surface.
It's a very, very valid point.
I mean, I just want to make the point that divvying it up geographically is not unusual. We do that for all of the other legislative branches of government going higher up. So this is a normal thing. I mean, maybe I'm biased because I grew up in Boston, and so we always had, we had our district counselors and we had our at-large counselors. And I never felt like I wasn't represented, because everybody was working for the city, so.
I think in a city
But
that you
it
have
was
very
nice to have
different-
somebody who I could go to for my constituent services, and that's what I'm thinking here. Like, it's nice to have somebody to go to for your, have a go-to person, not for your special interest, but like, if you have 9 at-large counselors, like, who's going to be the most responsive? Do I have to talk to all 9 of them if I've got a question about something that's going on in town? I really like the idea of having that precinct person.
I mean, I can tell you, I grew up in, city, lived in cities, and I agree with that in a city, completely agree with that, because the demographic and your areas are very different, and your needs are very different, and it's not like, this is a small town, right? And 90% of the decisions that we make at town meeting have nothing to do with my neighborhood, right? If not more than 90%, right? It's all about the budget, it's about, the schools, the police, the fire, whatever it happens to be. It's all of those other decisions that we're making, that once in a while we get a zoning issue that might affect my area that we vote on. But the majority of the decisions, I think we're hyper-focusing on that, but the majority of the decisions that we make at a town meeting, that our town council would be making, have nothing to do with my neighborhood, have to do with my town.
Yeah.
And again, I think it's very, very different in a city. Having lived in the cities that, where my neighborhood was very different than another neighborhood across town. And we identified with our neighborhoods, I live in, you would say you live in this section, you live in that section. I don't feel like that in Norton at all.
Let's do 11, and then we can just do 5 and 6. That'll throw a wrench in the plan.
So, yeah, I don't know.
I think we're probably at a point where we're going to want to table this discussion until next week.
Was there anything else on that whole list at all, or no?
Number of members we're tabling. How they are elected, we are tabling. Term limits, we are going to table.
You want to talk about weak or strong town manager?
Yeah, I mean, we've got to get into the executive branch, specifically next. It is 10 minutes of 10. Do we want to journey into, I would also like to hear if anybody has had any ideas for education and public outreach. Should we possibly table discussion on charter pieces until next week?
Can I just ask a question about the weak versus strong? I think maybe we need to outline specifically, I think that was your point, Denise, right? What does it mean to be weak or strong? Like, what are some of the things that we might be considering changing about the town manager's role from what we currently have? And that's not something to discuss now, it's just maybe something for the next meeting. We can
Yeah, I was gonna say,
list or something of what does that mean? You know, what is that specifically? What decisions do we need to make about the powers of the town manager?
myself, I need a little more time to digest the executive branch stuff.
Okay.
And just kind of think about it.
Yeah.
A little bit more specifically, like you just said, like, exactly what does that look like to me?
The only
I was
thing
mostly joking with my suggestion that we start talking about that now.
Oh.
10 of 10.
the only thing I'd like to say about
It's a
that-
meaty question, right? Yeah.
The only thing I'd like to say about it, just for going forward, so maybe we can kind of keep it in our, in our heads for when we do discuss it. I think the two most important things with that, with the town manager, whether it be strong or weak, is we have to think about the actual position. Not who's gonna be there, what's gonna happen. I think that's, because to me, the town council is important, but if you're ever gonna make that town manager a strong town manager, you're setting yourself up for, if you give it, if you give the power as a strong town manager, you open yourself up for a lot of candidates to come in. Because that's what town managers want. We heard it from them. They want the ability to dictate what the plan of the town is. They don't want it to be taken away or be kind of held hostage where they can't make the decisions they're gonna make. So I think for long-term, in the actual position, I think that's gonna, like, that's where I think our heads kind of have to go.
But I'm more worried about, do I want all the power in one person's hands versus appealing to the candidates necessarily,
Well, I think
right?
town council needs to have some type of, again, I don't want to get too much into it. I think town council needs to have some, back and forth or some checks and balances of what the town manager do. But I think the day in and day out stuff, their product should be what the town council is saying that they're not doing. They are doing a good job, but they're not doing a good job. And that's where you get the ability to say, we're not renewing your contract, we're looking for somebody else. That's where I think that's, in the game plan of 5-10-year plan, that's on their plate. And then the town council can evaluate it and go forward.
So maybe we can look at what the current role of our town manager is now, what his responsibilities are, if we want to take any of those away. And then also what additional pieces do we want to consider for
Giving.
giving, right?
Right.
Well, Mike is considered a strong town manager.
Right.
Right.
Because he appoints, he does the budget, he does a lot. It's, the selectmen don't do is, they don't appoint anybody, so.
They appoint some. There are some that
I
are
think
appointed
they have to
by.
approve some
Well, what
of
happens is,
them.
you come to the meeting and they
Yeah.
meet you and all that, but
Yeah.
basically, it's in Mike's hands.
Yeah.
But there are some committees that are appointed specifically by the board and some that are appointed by Mike, based on what's on the
Well,
website anyway.
As employees and
They-
they do,
right.
they
Yeah.
do committees and boards.
Correct.
But I think with something like what Keith's saying is that, okay, X department makes, their department head makes a hire. Mike approves the hire, and then it goes in front of selectmen for this charade of
Introduce
yes,
them.
stamp, and then it's waive the 14 days, stamp, to appoint them, where are we, again, making more work for ourselves, where, when's the last time, and I'd love to see this, that a department head, who we trusted to do their job, bring an appointment forward, and the selectmen go, no. And I'm talking for town employees, I'm not talking about others, I'm talking about that stuff. We're trusting a department head, we're paying them the money because they're qualified to make that appointment through the town manager signing off on it. We're going in front of the selectmen for a rubber stamp and to waive the 14 days. It happens almost every single time that appointment's made for a town employee.
But I think it still needs to be there just solely for the checks and balances, because what if a town manager comes in and just starts hiring all of his family?
Well, I
And you
think-
have no way of stopping him.
Well, I think that's where the town council rules come in on, do they need to make every single red stamp and wait the 14 days, or is something that if it's approved, that town, like, that's what I'm talking about, like, we're waiting, right now, we have a thing where it's 14 days or whatever it may be, and they're waiving the 14 days, which is happening every time, so is that something that needs to be in the bylaws of town appointments, or is it something that when the town manager brings that appointment forward, does the town council say, we agree with you, there's no reason to wait on this, it gets done that night? Those are the little things that I
What is the
think.
14 days from the time that Board of Selectmen approves
I'm not
it?
sure the exact rules on it, but basically what happens is, and Keith, you could probably say more, but when a department head says, okay, I'm gonna hire so-and-so to be a part of the highway department, Mike agrees, yep, it's stamped forward, now it comes in front of the selectmen. It's supposed to be that the selectmen approve it, there's supposed to be a 14-day period where it's,
Because
They
it's
can like
easily-
consider it.
if they throw a red flag, they can,
But what happens 99.9% of the time is there's a, let's waive the 14 days because they obviously need this appointment, they need to get this person working and go forward. So it takes effect immediately. So what I'm saying is, are we just wasting time with those type of little things where if Mike's making the appointment or the town manager's making the appointment, it can be done that night and that's it? You know what I mean? I think those are the little things where you bring in town manager appointing.
well, I know that the selectmen want to see faces. They want the people on TV to see this new guy, new police officer, new fire, whoever. They like to see him up there so people can see the faces,
To me, that's something that should be up to the town council to delegate if they choose to the town manager.
But I think that might have to be outlined in, I don't know, it's a good question.
I mean, I
So
think
maybe
sometimes.
give the town council more flexibility, is that,
Yeah, yeah.
So-
We trust you, or we don't trust you, you messed up the last two, so now we want to see them. Rather than being hot and fast, either yes or no, comes to us or doesn't come to us, and maybe it's more.
So the way the charter is currently written, appointments are effective 15 days following the date on which the notice of appointment is filed with the Board of Selectmen, unless within that period 4/5 of the board vote to reject such appointment, or a majority has sooner voted to affirm it. So
So
it
by-
doesn't necessarily have to wait the 15 days, it just,
It's kind of like if the board doesn't vote, by nature, 15 days later, they become,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think what happens in
Yeah.
Traffic Alley, I'm gonna guess.
well,
is-
or if it needs to happen imminently, the board can vote on it.
So some of the
Sooner.
things,
done that for me.
right.
but some of the things like even the chief of police brought up and even like the fires, that where that comes into play is, for instance, you're hiring a new police officer. You really can't have that swearing in ceremony of on TV what other towns and cities you see happen. That's what I think that was brought up between what Mike was talking and both chiefs were talking. Because of that possibility that the 15 days may be put off, the person's not sworn in until those 15 days, and that may not fall on a selectmen's meeting or whatever it is now. That's where I think where if you come with town council and that is approved by that day, you are actually having a swearing-in ceremony with the town clerk and the appointment's done right away on TV where everybody sees it.
So I think the way I understood what you were saying is the 15 days is only if the board isn't meeting in that 15-day period, or hasn't voted in that 15-day period. The board could vote the very next day or the same day and approve it by 4/5, and it's active that day.
And,
But didn't you say if it's improved, or right there, if it's
Yeah.
approved by 4/5?
So it has to be rejected by 4/5 of the board within 15 days of it being filed with the Board of Selectmen, but it can be approved by a majority sooner.
So that's what happens on that night. So they come out,
Oh, because they're waiting the 15 days for the
They're waiving.
rejection. I gotcha.
they're waiving it because the majority's voting that it takes effect immediately, if that's what the department head's asking.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they don't know, the department head doesn't know that they have the majority because they don't know you don't know who's gonna show up for that meeting at that specific time, so you may not get that majority right away. That's the confusion. So you don't know if the town clerk's gonna be there. That's what the chiefs were talking about with the swearing in and all that other stuff. Where you see in other towns, the ability to go in front of, say, town council, because the appointment's made effective that date, they get sworn in from town, the
Yeah.
clerk right there, and it's done.
I hear, and I think the checks and balance part, I definitely hear, but it's only valuable if they're asking the questions that you'd be concerned about as checks and balance. But I have not heard those questions ever asked when they've had an appointee brought before them.
No, but
It's usually just
I'm
a
afraid if
pleasant
there's
conversation.
if there's no break, if there's no governor, then the town manager is basically free, he's to do whatever he wants because there is no mechanism to stop him.
But isn't the check and balance, that you have the police chief and the town manager, is it, can we, is that,
Or I think
aren't they checking and balancing each other, isn't the police chief is making the recommendation, correct? And then.
I mean, there's certain requirements that for every town thing, or the qualifications, whatever
Right.
those requirements meet. So that department head will make a recommendation to the town manager that they hire that person. In my opinion, the town manager is, no matter what town manager is gonna be able to know every single reason on why they're hiring. They have to go through civil service, they have to go through a bunch of other stuff. You're trusting your department heads to make those decisions because of maybe civil service and maybe what the qualifications are. So when they make that recommendation, well, why are you making that recommendation to me? Well, these are the reasons why. They meet all the requirements, this is the person on civil service, because we're a civil service town, and they're done. The town manager, 99.9% of the time, is gonna say, this is what you do, this is why that's why I made you chief of police, to do these things. I'm approving that,
Yeah.
you know, hire.
I guess I would think it's a little more important to have a town council or some other balance, checkpoint on a department head
I agree.
versus on
Yes.
a department, if a department head is appointing their, as you
So-
said, you trust the department head, to appoint, and then you have the, town manager rubber stamping it or asking.
Right, and the
questions or whatever.
department head has the authority to appoint the people within his staff.
Right.
So my thinking would be that the town manager could appoint people unless there are certain criteria, perhaps, that would cull out the ones that need to go before the board, right? So unless the person that's being appointed is, let's say, related to anyone else that's also an employee of the town, then that has to go before the board, and let's understand, like, are you give me the reasons why you appointed the person, what other candidates applied, what was the pool, like, so you can make sure there's no issue of ethics violations or whatever that was going on. But, just a thought. I don't know. I don't know that I'm prepared to make a decision on it tonight, but yeah, definitely a lot.
And I think a lot of these things too get worked out because of the way we have to hire people. The civil service does 99.9% of those things that you're talking about, so civil service has so many rules with those type of appointments that the time they get to that point, civil service has to sign off on them. If there's anything that's out of whack, civil service will not allow you to hire that person. So that's what I'm saying, is that we're going through a process with a lot of these things with hiring, it's just mainly like, it's moving to the next step where we can cut out 5 or 6 things and still have the ability to say, okay, if we want to review it, we want to come in, we want to talk to the person, but we're going to approve it tonight because the town manager is suggesting that we do, and maybe. Like, I just want there an avenue to be that, let's get this done.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want going before the council to be just rubber stamp. If it's gonna be in a meaningful way, there's gonna be meaningful questions asked, I think there's value to it, but not just to come before it and say, nice to meet you, yep, we approve it tonight, like, what am I learning, what are they learning from that?
I need to do more research.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I think at that point, it's more ceremonial and you're swearing in by,
right, but so that's what I'm saying, is if it's just ceremonial, then
Right.
it doesn't really matter, like, why do we have to have it?
right.
Well, that's why like, I would argue that the department head should be the ones that are making that recommendation to the town manager. That's why you hire department heads, that's why you
Right.
give them that job, is that if they're not doing their job, they answer to the town manager.
Yeah.
They're not doing their budget right, if they're hiring the wrong people, if they're making mistakes, if there's constant problems, well, then the town manager deals directly with the department heads like he does now. I mean, Keith, if you don't do your job, you have to answer to Mike.
Yeah, I don't know, food for thought.
I know we're going.
Okay, so, for the next meeting, let's be prepared to make a decision on number of council members, how that they are elected, whether we are going to impose term limits on them, and let's do some research and be ready to discuss the executive branch. That is the town manager, their powers and duties, whether they're weak or strong, how they're appointed, their qualifications, acting town manager procedures, whether we want a residency requirement, things of that nature.
Okay.
Do your homework. Did anybody have any ideas on outreach and education for the public?
Not yet.
I had one thought, and it sort of came up as, I think, at the tail end of the last meeting. Having now sat in this seat for however long I've been here, 8 months, 7 months? I've learned an incredible amount, and in talking with you folks have all learned the same amount. In our heads, I think we are giving the general public maybe a little bit too much credit in that they are following along and know exactly how everything works. So I'm actually wondering if maybe we want to consider doing little short videos that not only educates them on what we are proposing and recommending, but here's what we have now, and this is how your government works, and this is how we are proposing it's going to work, so that, I think I had mentioned last week that I was having a discussion with somebody who I had assumed understood that if we went to representative town meeting, that they don't meet any more frequently than open town meeting does. And they were surprised to hear that, and I'm wondering if maybe we want to do sort of by education, kind of a, here's where we are, here's what we could have done. We didn't, we went a little bit step further because of these, and we wanted it to be more nimble and adaptive and responsive to the needs of the town in a more quick manner. So that was a thought of just doing a short, maybe 5-minute videos on each of those topics. So it was an idea. What's that?
Civics 101.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah, well, I can see it really being strong, like the discussion we had tonight, let's just assume we didn't go with precincts. I think a lot of people.
We did or didn't?
We
What
did.
are we assuming?
Assume we didn't. I mean, quite frankly, I think most people expect that we will go with precincts. Because I think intuitively, that's what they're thinking.
Yeah, and I also think that
And they
after,
wouldn't understand why we didn't, without us explaining. So we go that way,
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, and, we have the resources of the Norton Media Center. We can go down there and sit in front of, I think you and Amy did one for something.
It was for this.
Was it charter?
Signature,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Like 18 people watched it.
no, you had a lot of views in
I
there.
know.
This was 9 of them.
But I also think after last meeting, and I think even more so after this meeting, I think more people are paying attention. I think that last week when we discussed, in taking that straw poll vote, I think more people are paying attention, and I think more people are reaching out to all of us individually, and I think that we're gonna see more, more want from us and more stuff like that. So however we do it, I'm fine with it, but I do think that last week was a bit of a turning point for people, and I think we'll see more people tuning in, and I think we'll see more people commenting and reaching out to individuals. I feel like I've already seen that trend in just 1 week, or 2 weeks.
I went to the joint committees meeting, and I didn't get through the door, and everybody wanted to talk to me. And I couldn't get out the door because everybody wanted to talk to me.
Right, and now people are focusing.
Yeah.
Do we want to go back to putting agendas out there, or, just because now we actually have.
On the website, you mean?
Well, we were putting it out on Facebook, weren't we, for a little bit?
Oh,
Just
on
to try
social
to-
media.
Just to say, look, we're taking some important votes.
Yeah, school committee does that.
Starting
Yeah.
to really.
Minutes as well, and then they'll know how,
Yeah, we could.
We're
I think
deciding?
Definitely just to even say, these are the things, pay attention, we're starting to vote now.
And point
These are some of
out,
the things that are coming up in our discussions, and
and point out the open forum, especially
Right.
within our
Yeah.
agenda.
Yeah.
And what that means for them,
Right.
if they have anything they want to add or contribute, or, I know that emails have gone back and forth, or, opinions coming in, but there's 15 minutes and time with the microphone if anybody wants it.
As we complete like chunks of it, I do like the little video idea too, as long as I'm not in it.
No, but I think it makes sense to start at the beginning and sort of explain what the differences are and.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think we just have to remember that once we get through writing all of this, that, oh yeah, there were we've got to start literally at the square one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and I do think that makes sense, because we've had how many meetings, and nobody's going to go back and watch the progression of our
Yeah.
discussion, so.
Yeah.
well, we're talking about a lot of the issues that we've heard, right? And that's getting out to the public what we've heard for issues, what we keep hearing for themes, why we're considering the changes we're considering, even in the first place. We're not trying to just fix something for the sake of fixing it, or change something for the sake of
Yeah.
changing it.
I think the videos also help when, if we're going to have a public hearing, and even if we manage to get in 2 or 3, there's still going to be people that are going to be like, I can't, it's going to be probably in the evening. There are people who work nights, I can't make it to the meeting. At least if there's something online that we can refer them to say, here, we're trying to help.
Even if we give a video, I think maybe like, if we narrow down our decisions and get all our votes in for what we're changing in the legislative branch, we can maybe give a video on how that piece is kind of solved and how it kind of trickles down to now affecting, the executive, like, for instance, because town council would be no more board of selectmen, like, being able to make those correlations of these are the things that you're gonna see change because of this. Because I still truly think that some people are under the impression, well, if we go with town council, we're still gonna have like this board of selectmen thing. I've heard that a couple times, like, I think there's some severe confusion on that there is gonna be no more board of selectmen that,
Yeah. And it doesn't even have to be, people in front of a camera. It could be a PowerPoint presentation that's just narrated.
Exactly.
So you don't even have to be on screen. What'd you say?
You found Dave's next job. There you go.
I just think it gives people kind of an outline of, and visually see how each thing kind of, a great PowerPoint would be, this is what we had, this is what we went to, and then, these are
Like
the.
an animation that goes.
Yeah, these are the major changes. These are the things that you'll lose,
There needs to be an even number of pages.
no longer gonna exist. These are things that are no longer gonna exist. This is kind of what's gonna replace it, so people can have that track. 'Cause I think right now, I've heard it from multiple people that they really truly aren't understanding that you're losing some significant parts of this with this change. I think people like the idea of it.
Losing, we're evolving.
Yes, I shouldn't say losing, but, the change is there, and I don't think people are realizing that because of this vote for town council, if you are voting on this, you're going to see a lot of things that you're used to no longer exist, and I think that's right now is a disconnect to some people.
Yes, and we have to show them how it fits into.
And once you explain it, I think I've done it a few times over the last couple of weeks, once I've explained it, it's like, oh, okay, I understand now what you mean, but I think they're having
Yeah, something that
quick and
we may
easy.
not be able to be available to discuss, but
Mhm.
we can direct them to a resource that's available 24/7. I like the idea of putting the agendas out on Facebook, similar to how
Yeah. Me too.
Board of Selectmen and the school committee are doing it, so. Can I ask Janie if you'd do that going forward? That would be great, thank you.
And just for places, social media places.
Yeah, Norton Neighbors, Invest
Peter
In,
Channel. Facebook.
and there's another one, Norton.
Connect or
Connect, I think it is, although I'm not sure it's got it doesn't hurt.
Sure, yeah.
Can't hurt. Might help.
Never heard of that one.
Yeah. Okay, is there anything anybody would like to further discuss this evening? All right. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. We're adjourned.